Chaos. Chaos. The troops from both countries were engaged in a fearsome battle. The battlefield was covered with the corpses of soldiers. The MOU troops had rushed from the city to fight against the Shuayu troops. The MOU troops constituted a powerful army and their spears glowed through the dark night with fearsome killing. The broken weapons on the ground emitted quiet metallic clangs from their movements. On both sides of the city, the Qi Xie troops gathered into one location on the battlefield, they then fired another volley of arrows towards the MOU army. The fire was still raging and the heat from the fire was growing more intense with every passing moment. The MOU troops didn't know how to react. At the same time, amongst the MOU troops, a sword glowed with a radiant light and released a terrifying deadly qi. The sword slashed in a circle at full speed which created a terrifying pressure which killed hundreds of soldiers. It was Lin Feng. After that sword attack, the other Qi Xia elites who had infiltrated the enemy's army also started to mercilessly slaughter the unguarded troops around them. It created chaos throughout the enemy army. However, they continued to follow orders and did not attach a great importance to their own lives. Fighting at that moment was an army of 250,000 MOU troops while the Shuayu troops were composed of less than 100,000 troops. MOU, while suffering heavy losses within the city, still held the advantage in numbers. However, sooner or later, the other Shuayu troops would have a direct confrontation with the enemy army, they just had to wait until the MOU troops moved closer. In the time it would take for the MOU army to reach them, how many arrows could they fire? But they had already killed half of the MOU army and had caused chaos within the army. Considering the fact that they still had the Qi Xie troops ready to fight and Lin Feng's group of elites inside the enemy army causing chaos, it was safe to say that they had complete control over the situation. When fighting the enemies in a head-on battle, who would have the bravest soldiers? Which side would win? Lin Feng was moving through the army. Anyone who tried to block Lin Feng turned into another corpse on the ground. Lin Feng wasn't alone though, he was surrounded by the group of elites accompanying him. The battle between MOU and Shuayu was a battle of victory or death. Retreating wasn't an option. Lin Feng had no choice. He needed to go and save Princess Duan Xianyi. Duan Xianyi had been kidnapped while he was protecting her. If something happened to her, Lin Feng would not only suffer a death sentence but it was also mean punishment for Lu Qinlan. Lin Feng had to rescue Duan Xianyi. To Lin Feng's left, a sword was also unceasingly glowing and every time it moved someone was killed, making its owner look like a reaper of death. His sword was moving much faster than that of Lin Feng's sword, each of its blows were not only faster but also much more powerful. The deadly qi it was releasing was several times heavier than that released by Lin Feng. It was clear that the owner of this sword had been through countless bloodbaths. Lin Feng turned around and saw the young man cutting down his enemies and was shocked. Currently the young man's face was not like that of a beautiful girl. At that moment, he looked ice-cold and emotionless. He was wearing pure white robes, but he looked like a death god. It was obviously Wen Ao Shui. No wonder he was so respected and revered at the Celestial Academy. Wen Ao Shui's beautiful eyes were as sharp as the god of death's sword. On the horizon, a beautiful light started to fill the sky. Day was starting to break. Outside of Duanren City, the sea of broken weapons had also turned into a sea of blood and corpses. These corpses were still fresh and blood continued to pour from the bodies to create a sea of blood. Lin Feng rushed forwards and with a single deadly sword he killed a dozen soldiers in his path. However, Lin Feng wasn't excited at all. He looked at all the countless corpses covering the battlefield. His heart felt saddened. This was war and their lives didn't matter much on the battlefield, but to someone they mattered. A rumble spread through the atmosphere and was coming from a distant place on the horizon. It was a crash of lightning as if the heavens were descending with their wrath. The entire crowd couldn't help but shiver from head to toe. Everybody slowly raised their head and looked to the horizon. On the horizon where the sun had started to rise there was now a sea of black clouds. It seemed like a human shape had appeared within them, but it quickly disappeared. Darkness filled the battlefield once again as the sky was covered by these clouds. It looked like a completely black creature who looked down on humans with disdain from the sky. How terrifying, thought Lin Feng. When he saw the sea of black clouds appear in the sky, his heart started pounding. A group of barbarians dare to fight against my MOU. A silhouette appeared in the middle of the sea of black clouds. Immediately after, the palm of his hand thrust out and a black seal appeared on the ground. The seal was the shape of a castle. There was a thick black deadly chi within which pounded into the ground and crushed anything in its way. The ground was violently shaking. The hearts of the Xueyu army were all trembling with fear. That attack had just killed 1,000 Xueyu soldiers. One attack was enough to claim 1,000 lives. These Xueyu soldiers could barely see it coming before they had been crushed, without even the time to give a horrible shriek. A gigantic black crater appeared in the ground from the attack. All the corpses of the Xueyu troops had disappeared into that blackness. Besides, those who were near the attack, men and horses were sent hurtling away. The faces of Xueyu army turned deathly pale. What kind of cultivator was that? Facing such a strong cultivator, they had lost all their courage to fight. Everybody had stopped moving. The Xueyu army had come to a halt, the Mou army had stopped too. They had all raised their heads and were blankly staring at that black silhouette in the sky. A short moment after, the Mou troops gave a furious shout which made the ground shake. That was an extremely strong cultivator from Mou. Alone, he could annihilate an entire army. When Lin Feng heard that shout, his sword slightly trembled. There was no room for strategy, he couldn't bring about a radical change in this situation. In front of such a strong cultivator, who could influence the entire course of the war, there was nothing he could do. He raised his left hand. Lin Feng hated his own weakness. He was not strong enough to protect himself and was not strong enough to influence the continent. That black palm must have been genuine pure energy and the cultivator must be at the Xian Qi layer. That pure energy was extremely brutal. A cultivator of the Xian Qi layer could rely on pure qi and pure energy. Such a person could control the sky and eliminate his enemies with powerful attacks. He was clearly at the Xian Qi layer and Chu Zhanpeng would be like an ant to be crushed under this cultivator's shoes. Someone who could control the sky and attack from the heavens was at least at the peak of the Xian Qi layer. Rumors said that the strongest cultivators could fly in the sky and kill millions of people as they wished. Those rumors were all true. That was the world of cultivation. Strong cultivators could act as they pleased. Soldiers, emperors, rulers, as long as they were strong, they could destroy or save life as they saw fit. Lin Feng also wanted to reach that point with his cultivation. He also hoped that he would be able to fly amongst the clouds someday. He was making great efforts to make that dream come true and he was unceasingly battling to gain enlightenment. His heart was filled with incredible ambitions and aspirations. He would grow to be as powerful as an unmovable mountain. But to reach such a cultivation level, how much determination, experience and training was required? Nobody knew. For example, the strong cultivator who was looking down on them from the clouds, could easily destroy the army of Xueyu. Could it be that the Xueyu army was going to die? Lu Tsanglan, you've been resisting my army for a while now, I respect you. You are an outstanding person, therefore I will let you die with dignity, I will allow you to take your own life. The black silhouette in the sky was looking at Lu Tsanglan and sounded like a majestic deity. In front of him, even the highest-ranking generals meant nothing. Lu Tsanglan raised his head while looking calm and indifferent. He looked at that silhouette in the sky. He then looked at the Xueyu army. It looked like he was lamenting. During a war between two countries, the strongest cultivators are not allowed to get involved. That is one of the rules that all countries respect, but today you come and pressure my army, have I tacitly consented? Lu Tsonglan's voice was filled with sorrow. You would respect the rule unless it really wanted to conquer Xueyu. At that moment, no matter if it was Mou or Xueyu, at neither of them had the power to conquer the other. Therefore, that rule couldn't be broken. Of course, there was one exception, if one side accepted the behavior of the other side. I accept. When the Xueyu troops heard Lu Tsonglan, they were all filled with great sadness. Lin Feng was extremely saddened. The princess had been kidnapped, and Duan Tianlang had caused chaos within the army. Lu Tsonglan, at that moment, had agreed to take his own life. This war had caused chaos, nobody knew what would happen from that point. Everybody was looking towards the sky at the black silhouette. They only saw that a cold smile had appeared on that black silhouette. He then said coldly, "Anyway, I will give you the time of 10 breaths, if you don't end your own life then I will personally kill you." How could a real man accept death? I would rather die in a battle. Too bad that I've gotten my troops involved, said Lu Tsonglan while raising his head and looking at that black silhouette in the sky. Dense battle energy started burning around his body. His body then flew into the air. He was determined to fight until the end. How could he humiliate himself with suicide? The entire Xueyu army looked extremely saddened. This battle was unfair. Since you want to die, I will help you achieve your goal, said the black silhouette coldly. He gathered the pure energy around his body once again. It contained immense power. In a towering rage, I rest under the whistling sound of rain. Gazing into the distance, looking up to the heavens, I utter a long and loud cry. My chest feels painful. 30 soldiers now with the dust and earth, the moon and the cloud stretching as far as can see. Suddenly a song filled the entire battlefield with a harmonious melody. If Lu Tsonglan dies today, Prince Wuxia will be buried here as well. That voice was so light and powerful that there was no doubt to the truth contained within those words. The black silhouette had a respectful expression on his face and he then looked into the distance and said, "Who dares to say such insane things?" Han Mo, did you think that the cultivators of Xueyu were gone? Asked a voice which was growing nearer and nearer to that location. That person was quickly approaching from a great distance away. A short instant later, another silhouette appeared in the sky. There was a floating cloud of pure qi underneath that man. He was sitting cross-legged on the cloud of pure qi, he was just calmly playing the zither in front of him. Yan Yu Ping Sheng, if I had known I would have brought a raincoat. When Han Mo saw the person, he was astonished. Why had he shown up on the battlefield? With magnificent ideals in my mind yet starvation filling my stomach, I eat their flesh. To settle my thirst, I drink their blood. The middle-aged man was singing and playing the zither. His fingers drifted above the strings and a white pure qi emerged. In a flash, an ear-piercing sound spread through the air, and suddenly, 1,000 soldiers from Mou died miserably under the power of his sound-based attack. While laughing and talking, he reduced the enemy to nothing, killing without spilling blood. Han Mo, if you kill my soldiers, I will kill your soldiers. In the same way, if you kill Lu Tsonglan, I kill Wuxia, said the middle-aged man coldly while looking at Han Mo. Even though he was killing people, he looked graceful while playing the zither and smiling. The crowd was astonished. He was another extremely strong cultivator. They couldn't stop him. One melody from his zither and he could instantly kill 1,000 people. When the Xueyu troops saw this person, they looked enthusiastic. Their hearts were once again filled with hope. They had never heard Yan Yu Pingsheng's name but they knew that if he could speak that way, it meant that he must be no weaker than the black silhouette. This was one of the elite cultivators of Xueyu. At that moment, Lin Feng's heart was pounding as well. Yan Yu Pingsheng, that was his real name. Lin Feng knew that middle-aged man in the sky, but he wasn't the only one. At the Celestial Academy, there were indubitably many people who knew him as well. That person was Lin Feng's zither teacher who taught him to cleanse his heart. It was his teacher from the peach tree orchard. Lin Feng hadn't thought that he would see him on the battlefield. It made Lin Feng finally start to feel relieved. The man that helped him break through to a higher Ling Qi layer was also one of the experts of the country. He was a wise man and he moved at the speed of lightning. He strangely looked like Wen Ao Shui somehow. He also had a womanly beauty to him, and on the battlefield, he had the presence of a death god. His attacks cut down the enemy army in thousands. Yan Yuping Sheng whispered Lin Feng. He wouldn't forget his name. Maybe Yan Yuping Sheng was even stronger than Long Ding, the vice principal. Han Mo was fixedly staring at Yan Yuping Sheng. He remained silent for a moment and then said, Yan Yuping Sheng, long time no see. Would you like to fight against me? If you want to fight, let's fight. Yan Yuping Sheng sounded calm. He was so calm as if the rest of the world couldn't affect his feelings. Pure Qi was condensing around Han Mo's body. He spun his right hand in the air and suddenly black pure energy appeared. Annihilation. Han Mo threw a punch through the air which created an incredible noise as it broke through the atmosphere. That pitch-black energy seemed like it wanted to cover the heavens and the earth with its seals. The attack was rushing straight towards Yan Yuping Sheng. Yan Yuping Sheng was calmly sitting on his white cloud of pure qi. His fingers moved over the strings of his zither and then an incredible bright light emerged and moved towards his opponent. PSH, 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 loud clashing sounds invaded the atmosphere. Immediately after, the resplendent and bright light pierced through that black energy. That incredible white light contained an amazing quantity of pure energy and it was moving straight towards Han Mo. However, the black energy was also continuing its way towards Yan Yuping Sheng even though the attack had been greatly reduced in power. Let's move to another place, shouted Han Mo while moving down through the air. That's exactly what I had in mind, replied Yan Yuping Sheng. His cloud of pure qi then vanished. Then the two silhouettes shot into the distance and moved far away from the armies. Finally, they disappeared from vision completely. Han Mo and Yan Yuping Sheng were extremely strong. If they had stayed there, their attacks would have killed the spectators, which is not what Han Mo and Yan Yuping Sheng wished. When all the troops saw the two silhouettes disappear in the horizon, they remained calm for a long time gazing into the distance. At such a level of strength, one person could affect the fate of an entire battle, they could destroy an entire army. They were extremely powerful. No wonder that the 9 countries decided to set a rule stipulating that such strong cultivators couldn't get involved in wars. They could slaughter an entire army with little effort. Die, shouted Lu Tsonglan in the air. He took his bow from his back and a golden spirit appeared behind him. His bow drew the attention of everyone. Lu Tsonglan then pulled back the string of his bow when golden arrow illusions appeared and immediately aimed at the MOU troops. He then released the bow string and 7 golden lights rushed through the air. Dozens of people died from this single attack. Die, shouted the Shuiyu army. The ground started to shake again. A moment before, Han Mo had killed 1,000 people with a single palm strike. He had also tried to force Lu Tsonglan to commit suicide, which had profoundly affected the morale of the troops, but at that moment, Yan Yuping Sheng had appeared and was fighting against Han Mo. He had come to save them. They still had hoped to be able to escape from death. He had lit the fire within their hearts once again. Blood was heavily flowing on the ground once again. Lin Feng was firmly holding his sword and unceasingly cutting down anyone in his path. A group of people was fighting alongside him. Wherever they went, blood flowed. The battlefield had no set area and the battle quickly grew to cover a larger area over time. There was absolutely no organization to this battle, it was only kill or getting killed. At that moment, Lin Feng finally noticed a silhouette. It was a beautiful girl riding on a horse, Duan Xinyi. However, she was unable to move. Her body had been tied. Besides, she was surrounded by 8 of the elite cavalry soldiers. These 8 people were wearing majestic black armor, they were members of the Black Guards. Duan Xianyi saw Lin Feng. Her beautiful eyes looked like a warm autumn day. The expression in her eyes revealed that she couldn't wait to be saved by Lin Feng. Of course, these Black Guards had also noticed Lin Feng killing his way toward them, leaving nothing but blood and corpses behind him. Their facial expressions grew cold and evil. At that moment, Lin Feng jumped forward and at the same time, a Black Guard also jumped towards him. Psh, the light emitted by Lin Feng's sword was dazzling. The Black Guard's hand moved. Immediately after, Lin Feng felt that a rapid river was rushing towards him. His sword was swaying in the midst of a raging storm of attacks. There was a noise like a wave crashing down on the atmosphere. When the energy they were releasing collided, Lin Feng was immediately blown backwards. He only saw that Black Guard had immediately landed back on his horse. He then looked at Lin Feng with a cold glare, and then the 8 Black Guards urged their horses forward and left with the princess. How strong! These Black Guards are extremely strong. Lin Feng's pupils shrank. Even though there were only 8 of the Black Guards, they were much stronger than all the people that Lin Feng had killed previously. Lin Feng rushed forward while brandishing his sword, and immediately after, a soldier fell down from his horse. Lin Feng immediately jumped on the horse and galloped towards these 8 Black Guards at full speed. Duan Xianyi had to be saved even if it cost him his life. The wind was piercing through Lin Feng's eardrums. He was urging like mad on his horse, galloping at full speed. The wind was piercing through Lin Feng's eardrums. He was urging like mad on his horse, galloping at full speed. 2 silhouettes brandished their spears. They wanted to block Lin Feng, but they only saw his sword glow for an instant. In a flash, these 2 silhouettes fell dead onto the ground. That move hadn't affected Lin Feng's speed at all. Lin Feng was still chasing the princess while being completely surrounded by a fierce battlefield with people dying all around him. Lin Feng was galloping at full speed. He was almost out of the Duanren border. These 9 silhouettes, without the slightest bit of hesitation, entered the passageway that led out of the Duanren border. Lin Feng followed them without hesitation. Even though the Duanren border was already under the control of Mou, Lin Feng was also wearing the armor of a Mou soldier, which made him look like he was one of them. Therefore, nobody was going to attack Lin Feng. Lin Feng, as well as the group following him, also passed through the passageway of the Duanren border smoothly. Passing through the passage didn't slow them down at all. Once they exited the passage, they could see corpses as far as their eyes could possibly see. These dead bodies lying on the ground were all of the Shuiyu troops. What fast horses! Even though Lin Feng's horse was galloping at full speed, he couldn't catch up with the Black Guards at all. Even though they were guided by the horse which Duan Xianyi was riding, these 9 brown horses were much faster than the ordinary horses Mou soldiers used. However, Lin Feng didn't intend to give up, and he was just as determined as before. They continued to chase them for a few hours. Lin Feng didn't know how much distance he had already covered. Once in a while, he could see smoke in the distance. At that moment, Lin Feng had already crossed the border that Shuiyu and Mou shared. At that moment, he was in the Mou country. At that moment, there was foam around the mouth of the horse which Lin Feng was riding, and it was covered with sweat. It looked exhausted. That horse had incredible strength and agility, but at that moment, it was already unable to continue. A horse that quick and agile was already exhausted. Lin Feng could already sense that he was near his enemies. The silhouettes he had been chasing were finally slowing down, and then they slowly stopped. Lin Feng then abruptly pulled on the reins to make his horse come to a halt. The horse neighed, and suddenly, the legs of Lin Feng's horse suddenly bent and it fell down. At the moment when Lin Feng was pulling on the reins, the horse was already too exhausted to continue. It no longer had the energy to continue. Lin Feng jumped down from the horse. He raised his head and saw that the people he was following were also slowly turning around. While remaining on their horses, they coldly looked towards Lin Feng. Behind these people, Duan Xinyi was staring at Lin Feng. Even though her hair was messy, her beautiful face wasn't covered, and her soft and delicate face revealed that she was touched by Lin Feng's actions. Her expression was bewitching. "Let the princess go." Lin Feng grabbed the long sword from his back. He then slowly started walking forwards. He looked cold and expressionless. The tip of his sword was dragging across the ground, which was sliced open by the sword, leaving a trail behind it. "The prince has given us the order to capture him alive," said one of the black guards indifferently. Lin Feng was stupefied, as the prince wanted him alive. The prince was obviously Wuxia. Could it be that he had planned everything from the beginning and had sent these soldiers to escort the princess and run far away with her so that Lin Feng would follow them? It was too bad that we had to spare his life last time. All we could do was take the princess alive. "The prince is too merciful," said one of the men. His face was visible though. Even though he wasn't very old, his face was already covered with a long beard. Besides, what surprised Lin Feng is that even though the 8 people accompanying Duan Xinyi were all black guards, their helmets were different than normal. Amongst them, 4 of them had a helmet which entirely covered their face except for their eyes. The 4 others were wearing helmets which didn't entirely cover their faces. The one who had just talked was one of those wearing a helmet which didn't cover his entire face. "Hu Qiong, even though we cannot kill him, we can teach him a good lesson. We can still be incredibly cruel," said another person. Hu Qiong was surprised. An evil smile appeared on his face. His horse then started walking towards Lin Feng. "Do you know what status the 4 of us have?" asked Hu Qiong coldly. "The 4 idiots," replied Lin Feng with an indifferent tone. How could he know who Hu Qiong and the others were? Idiots. Hu Qiong smiled coldly. "You will realize how foolish you have been to attack us. We are all Black Guard lieutenants. We were leading troops on the battlefield, but because of you and that trap you organized, the prince ordered us to leave and capture you alive. You should be proud of yourself." "Lieutenants," Lin Feng was surprised. Because of him, they used the princess as bait and scent for lieutenants. Against all expectations, they were really interested in him. But who were the 4 with their faces covered? Even though the chi they released was not as strong as that of the lieutenants, it was also extremely strong. "Your strategy to set the city on fire has led to the death of many of our fellow soldiers, and even though I cannot kill you, I want to beat you within an inch of your life. All I feel is hatred towards you," said Hu Qiong. He then grabbed his weapon, which was a gigantic axe. He looked ferocious and terrifying. His axe probably weighed at least a few hundred kilos. "Arf!" Hu Qiong shouted furiously. His horse suddenly charged towards Lin Feng at full speed. His axe let out a loud thunderous roar as it tore through the air. Lin Feng unsheathed his sword with incredible speed and sliced off the front legs from the horse which Hu Qiong was riding. Hu Qiong continued and jumped from his horse towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng then raised his sword to block the axe as it crashed down from above. When the axe and Lin Feng's long sword met, Lin Feng was pushed down. The shock alone was enough to make Lin Feng groan, as he had been injured. How powerful, thought Lin Feng. He was astonished. He was blankly staring at the enemy. That guy was the same strength as the leader of the Black Guards he killed before, 7th Ling Chi layer. He was a level stronger than Lin Feng. Besides, the pressure of Hu Qiong's battle axe striking Lin Feng felt like a mountain crashing down on him, and it even split the ground beneath him. "You cannot even withstand a single attack," laughed Hu Qiong while looking down on Lin Feng. However, when he raised his axe again, he was astonished. Lin Feng suddenly transformed into a shadow and disappeared from sight. Lin Feng had acted so quickly that Hu Qiong didn't even have time to react. He was still clumsily raising his huge axe. "Be careful," shouted one of the black guards, but it was too late. Lin Feng's sword was already at Hu Qiong's throat. Hu Qiong was still trying to raise his axe, but Lin Feng had already withdrawn his sword. Vanishing shadow was the art of taking people's lives by sudden surprise attacks before they could react. One strike was enough. That was the power of a D-level skill. Even when Lin Feng was still at the 4th Ling Qi layer, he had used the same attack to kill a cultivator at the 7th Ling Qi layer. Lin Feng already possessed the strength of the 6th Ling Qi layer. Not only was his basic strength improved by a great deal, but he had also trained with using his martial skills. Practicing his martial skills allowed him to utilize maximum strength when attacking. He could use his vanishing shadow to slaughter people in an instant. Of course, Lin Feng had managed to kill Hu Qiong, who was at the 7th Ling Qi layer, because he underestimated Lin Feng. He had thought that he was a true expert, and Lin Feng exploited that opportunity. "I don't want to die." Hu Qiong's throat let out a small cry, his voice husky. And suddenly, blood poured from his throat, and even if he didn't want to die, he was already dead. Life and death, a momentary slip and it could all be over. "Hu Qiong," shouted the 3 other lieutenants at the same time. The 3 other lieutenants were looking at Hu Qiong's collapsing silhouette, their faces were red with anger. "Hu Qiong," shouted the 3 other lieutenants at the same time. The 3 other lieutenants were looking at Hu Qiong's collapsing silhouette, their faces were red with anger. They then raised their heads and looked at Lin Feng with boiling killing intent. "You dared to kill Hu Qiong," said one of the lieutenants sounding ice-cold while fixedly staring at Lin Feng. "Did you not see it?" asked Lin Feng fearlessly. Lin Feng had an opportunity to kill his opponents, he wasn't going to miss it. Hu Qiong possessed the strength of the 7th Ling Qi layer. Hu Qiong's axe was incredibly powerful to the extent that Lin Feng had been injured by the shock from his attack. If he hadn't killed Hu Qiong, it was the same as committing suicide. During a war, while 2 sides were fighting, all battles were a matter of life and death. "Gur," the lieutenant gnashed his teeth. He hated Lin Feng and wanted to kill him, but Prince Mo Jie had given the order to capture Lin Feng alive. Nobody dared disobey Mo Jie's orders. "You 4, go and capture him," said the lieutenant while turning around to look at the 4 who had their faces covered. He sounded cold and commanding. "No, we can't do that," said one of them. That lieutenant was surprised. His facial expression became even colder. Lin Feng was also surprised. It seemed like the relationship between them was not that good. But what kind of relationship did they have? "We are willing to send out 3, but 2 of you have to help them to capture him." "How does that sound?" continued the man whose face was covered. He sounded like he was the leader of those 4. "All right," said the lieutenant after being unable to make up his mind for a brief period. He then nodded and said, "If you don't fight with all your strength, don't blame me for being impolite." These 5 people moved towards Lin Feng, 2 lieutenants and 3 of the black guards with their faces covered. When these people released qi in force, Lin Feng felt that he was suffocating. How strong! These people had all broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer. Looking solemn, Lin Feng's eyes slowly turned dark. His eyes became cold and expressionless. He gave the impression that he could control everything around him. He could perceive everything clearly, even each individual leaf rustling in the wind. While facing 5 strong cultivators of the 7th Ling Qi layer, Lin Feng was completely focused. What seemed like an endless quantity of battle energy was surrounding his body. The ground beneath Lin Feng was shaking and his armor was emitting metallic clangs. Lin Feng was firmly holding his sword. Even when facing 5 cultivators at the 7th Ling Qi layer, Lin Feng didn't flinch. On the path of cultivation, one of the best traits was a strong willpower and unwavering determination. Even if Lin Feng was facing 5 cultivators at the 7th Ling Qi layer, he wouldn't flinch. The only way out was a battle and everything else was destiny. That was the only path to reaching the clouds. Fearlessness led to supreme achievements. They could feel the powerful battle energy that Lin Feng was releasing, so the 5 cultivators remained vigilant. He had killed Hu Qiong, who had broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer, with a single strike. They couldn't let their guards down and give Lin Feng an exploitable opportunity. First, injure him severely. You don't need to be merciful. Just don't kill him, said one of the lieutenants coldly. Their horses neighed as they all rushed towards Lin Feng. They were all attacking Lin Feng at the same time. Lin Feng's body flickered and just like a shadow moved backwards and avoided the attacks. These 5 people continued to move forwards and suddenly, Lin Feng's silhouette suddenly disappeared without trace. Impossible, these 5 cultivators were astonished. There was only a blurry, dark light which looked like a specter in his place. At the same time, a sensation of danger rose within their hearts. He has a shadow spirit. Unable to change the situation, the 5 people continued rushing towards the specter with regret in their hearts. Dark shadow, die, a subtle sound spread through the atmosphere and blood splashed into the air. The shadow passed by 2 of the black guards and immediately after, Lin Feng became visible again. These 5 people had not grouped together effectively. Lin Feng had his back towards 2 of the black guards who were charging towards him at full speed. However, as they got closer to Lin Feng, their bodies trembled and they fell down from their horses, they were already dead. That was the second part of the D-level skill Cross Shadow, Dark Shadow. The cultivator could transform into an almost invisible and inaudible shadow. This was also the part which Protector Kong had never managed to master. However, Lin Feng, when releasing his celestial spirit, could use it with a small degree of mastery. Even though it wasn't perfect, he could still transform into a shadow which made him look like a transparent specter, barely visible. Besides, using that skill, he had easily killed 2 cultivators who had a higher cultivation than him. Of course, Lin Feng had to pay a huge price to do so. Lin Feng coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood and blood was dripping from the corner of his mouth. He hadn't mastered Dark Shadow, so he wasn't able to turn into a perfect shadow, which is why Lin Feng had been damaged by the opponent's attacks. However, he managed to kill 2 of them, which could be considered a great achievement. However, Lin Feng felt that his internal organs were badly injured. Lin Feng. Duan Xinyi was looking at Lin Feng and her cheeks were rosy. Why was Lin Feng doing all of this to save her? He was fighting so many strong opponents to save her. Bastard, furiously shouted the lieutenant who had not yet got involved. He immediately charged towards Lin Feng while throwing his most powerful punch. Lin Feng could perceive everything around him and could see that fist rushing towards him. Lin Feng quickly punched the ground with his right hand and propelled himself away from the attack. However, he was still affected by the power from that punch. Another mouthful of blood was coughed up as he landed. Lin Feng supported himself on the ground with one hand, but his face was incredibly pale. 8th Ling Qi layer. That lieutenant was also the strongest. He surprisingly had the strength of the 8th Ling Qi layer. You killed my brothers, you must die. As before, that lieutenant wasn't going to give up. He slammed his powerful foot into the ground and jumped through the air. He was launching another punch towards the injured Lin Feng. Boom! Lin Feng's body was propelled backwards. His injuries this time were much more severe. A moment before, he had already been severely injured, but now he had just received 2 punches from a cultivator of the 8th Ling Qi layer. Lin Feng, today you will die. Piercingly cold, deadly energy emerged from the lieutenant's body. He was slowly walking towards Lin Feng. The prince wants him alive. If you kill him, you are disobeying the prince's orders, said one of the men with the helmet covering his face. The lieutenant was surprised. He then immediately said in a cold way, he killed 2 of my brothers, if I cannot kill him, I will cut off his arms. "Cut off my arms," said Lin Feng while raising his head. His dark and expressionless eyes looked even more determined. He stood up and an incredible quantity of battle energy emerged from his body. This battle energy was insanely fluctuating around Lin Feng's body. Suddenly a gigantic ice spirit appeared behind Lin Feng and it seemed to reach the sky. It seemed like the entire area was instantly frozen. The temperature immediately dropped. Sword chi was whistling through the atmosphere. It was sharp and deadly. When the others saw that, they were stupefied. Lin Feng was still able to release such incredible battle energy, his willpower and determination was incredible. He took a step forward looking calm and detached, but after that step, the battle energy around Lin Feng's body turned into a violent tempest which started to rage in the center of the ice. The lieutenant was astonished. He narrowed his eyes. Lin Feng was incredibly dangerous. It seemed like his two types of energy had fused together with the energy from heaven and earth. It seemed like Lin Feng could take on anyone, including the lieutenant. He was showing the traits of a true hero. He had incredible willpower and zeal. His heart was fearless, filled with determination, and he felt like he could annihilate everything in his path. "Die," said Lin Feng with a calm voice. However, he didn't use his sword. He used his finger and formed it into a sword. It seemed like his finger had become a real sword. More and more force fused together with the other energy, he was using an energy attack. When Lin Feng raised his finger, it sounded like the air was being pierced by a sword. Boom! The lieutenant quickly released his fierce beast spirit which released an incredible power. It was an extremely strong spirit, a huge fierce beast that looked like a small mountain. He had the impression that Lin Feng was extremely dangerous. Even though he had broken through to the 8th Ling Qi layer, he was sure that he needed to use all his strength against Lin Feng. He used his most powerful attack, Oblivion Fist, and launched himself toward Lin Feng. Boom! The ground was shaking. An insanely strong wind rose between them, clouds of dust were fiercely blown in all directions. "Come back." Lin Feng was violently pushed back but ignored the blood coming from his mouth. Besides, as if his energy was inexhaustible, more piercingly cold chi, more sword chi and more battle energy emerged from body in what seemed to be an endless supply. Boom! The ground immediately caved in and a huge crater appeared where Lin Feng stood. Lin Feng was blown backwards once again and he unceasingly continued to cough up mouthfuls of blood. Duan Xianyi couldn't stand watching this scene any longer. However, it seemed like the quantity of qi emerging from Lin Feng's body didn't stop increasing. All the energy he released was fusing together. That fearless battle energy was becoming as powerful and majestic as the earth and the heavens. The lieutenant was looking at Lin Feng's expressionless eyes and at his ever-increasing qi. His facial expression became even more serious and his fierce beast spirit started to move while roaring loudly. The lieutenant was looking at Lin Feng's expressionless eyes and at his ever-increasing qi. His facial expression became even more serious and his fierce beast spirit started to move while roaring loudly. "Die!" shouted the lieutenant. The palm of his hand rushed towards Lin Feng. It was filled with extreme strength and it suddenly transformed into a huge bestial hand. The palm had become large enough to cover Lin Feng's entire body. This was clearly the strength of his spirit. Boom! That incredible force was crashing through the air towards Lin Feng. It felt like even the ground beneath him was shaking under the pressure, he felt like he was suffocating. However, his battle energy wasn't disappearing, Lin Feng was fearless. Instead of using a single finger, he used his entire fist and started to concentrate all of his energy into it. His entire fist became sharper than a sword. Anything that fist touched would be pierced straight through. The lieutenant's palm and Lin Feng's fist collided with a brutal explosion. Boom! Another extremely loud sound filled the air. The ground under Lin Feng's feet had cracked. The lieutenant was like a massive ferocious beast and he struck like a mountain crashing down onto Lin Feng. The noises has suddenly stopped and then the extreme power of the lieutenant's hand started oppressing Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng felt like his bones and internal organs were going to explode. He was badly injured but was still standing upright and he wasn't moving back at all, which caused everyone to blankly stare at him. After a moment the atmosphere became silent. Dripping blood was following the lieutenant's hand as it moved. What nobody knew is that a moment before, Lin Feng's fist had pierced the palm of his hand. There was a huge hole in its center. However, he didn't stop because he knew that Lin Feng's injuries were more severe than his own. At that moment, Lin Feng's fist was still against the lieutenant's palm. They were standing there motionless. Lin Feng's eyes were expressionless and he could clearly feel everything within his surroundings. That was Lin Feng's own world of darkness. His bones had been broken and his internal organs had been severely damaged. He could collapse at any moment and breathe his last breath, but, as before, he was standing tall. In his own world, ice was blue, sword energy was white and battle energy was golden. Everything, in his world, could be seen within his mind. He could borrow force from the world and use it to help him to carry out even more powerful attacks. Energy attacks were the highest achievement he had for using this method. He could make different types of energy fuse together and become even more powerful. Shockingly, each attack could be much stronger when fused than when using a massive amount of a single force. However, no matter if it was force or energy attacks, they were all absorbed from the outside world. They didn't belong to Lin Feng and did not count as his own strength. They were just tools that he could use to harness his strength. They required comprehension and represented a limited power. In the middle of his own world, Lin Feng had to use his own strength. In Lin Feng's world, the three colors were spinning and fusing together. At the same time, around Lin Feng's body, there was no ice, no sword energy and no burning battle energy. At that moment, he looked like an ordinary person who didn't even practice cultivation. There was absolutely nothing exceptional about him. However, while looking extremely common, there was still something mysterious, something which seemed like a heavenly mystery. Lin Feng's body was absorbing the pure qi from heaven and earth and that pure qi was being absorbed into every cell of his body. Lin Feng's bones, flesh, and muscles were constantly strengthening. His entire skeleton was emitting cracking sounds as if it was trying to reassemble itself from the broken state. The path of cultivation that a person walked could change their entire destiny. That sort of change wasn't brought about by a person's strength. Cultivation could modify cultivators' bones, flesh and muscles to make the body more suitable and stronger in accordance with a person's will. The bones could enhance and become a host for a stronger body. Flesh and muscles could be strengthened and blood vessels could be enhanced. A person's temperament was the only thing that could strengthen the power of the mind and spirit. A person's temperament would be affected by the cultivator's training method and actions, it was also the subject of constant change. Bones constantly needed to change and become stronger in order to be in perfect harmony with the strengthened body. That sort of change required damage. The bones had to be broken before they could become stronger. The weak flesh needed to be destroyed before it could become more resilient. When the body was broken it could continue to become stronger, however this was only meant for within cultivation practice, not battle. It was as if Lin Feng had changed the rules. He had only broken through to the sixth Ling Qi layer and his bones had been broken by external damage. This wasn't done in the process of cultivation, but during battle, however Lin Feng was using the external forces to gain a better understanding of cultivation and to strengthen his body. He had broken bones yet he was still standing. The people who were present were astonished. Their hearts were racing. They could feel that Lin Feng had changed but they couldn't say what had changed about him. He still seemed to be the same person as before. His temperament had completely changed. At that moment, it seemed like Lin Feng, the heavens and the earth were all in perfect harmony. It seemed like his true nature was finally revealed. Lin Feng seemed incredibly dangerous at that moment. The lieutenant who was fighting against him had a clear advantage, but he couldn't help but feel a terrible premonition as if he was in great danger. That feeling of insecurity made him quick to act again. He stamped his foot into the ground like a huge ferocious beast. The ground shook and a cloud of dust rose in the air. The lieutenant raised his head and rushed like a madman toward Lin Feng. The palm of a gigantic hand appeared again and rushed towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng moved his hand slightly and immediately swiped his hand in the direction of the illusionary palm. A bright light filled the air from the collision. When the light disappeared, the scent of blood filled the air. A hand had been cut off and was sent flying through the air. Immediately after, an extremely loud and painful shriek could be heard. Ah! My hand! A short moment after, the lieutenant realized that his hand was missing. He looked at his left forearm but there was no hand attached and only a fountain of blood pouring from his arm. A hideous expression covered his face. How was this possible? Even most cultivators of the 7th Ling Qi layer who were using weapons would not even scratch his skin. His fierce beast spirit was extremely strong. When using his beast spirit, his offensive and defensive abilities were terrifyingly high. However, at that moment, his hand had easily been sliced off. He didn't even know where that bright and resplendent light came from. There were absolutely no weapons in Lin Feng's hands. The other people were also staring at Lin Feng. They were astonished. That bright and resplendent light a moment before was Lin Feng's hand. At that moment, Lin Feng didn't look ordinary any longer. He was standing there and his entire body looked like it had transformed into a sword, an extremely terrifying sword. His body was a sword and his sword was his body. That bright and resplendent light had come from his hand because his entire body was a sword. Sword fusion. The crowd was astonished. Indeed, that was one of the sword force layers, sword and body fusion. Lin Feng had broken through to another layer of mastery regarding forces. Lin Feng only had the strength of the 6th Ling Qi layer but could surprisingly understand some of the mysteries of the Xian Qi layer, which even some cultivators of the Xian Qi layer couldn't understand. His natural talent and intelligence was monstrous. "Cut," said Lin Feng in a low voice. Lin Feng raised his hand again. The lieutenant was covering the stump on his forearm with his other hand and suddenly started shaking in fear. He wanted to move back but it was already too late. The mysterious bright light rose again and sliced into the lieutenant's throat like a flash. His face suddenly looked rigid and he immediately collapsed. A cultivator of the 8th Ling Qi layer was dead. Lin Feng, with his strength, had already killed 3 cultivators of the 7th Ling Qi layer as well as one of the 8th Ling Qi layer. From those 8 black guards, 1 lieutenant was left as well as 3 people whose faces were covered. Lin Feng turned around and looked at one of the people, whose face was covered. He was next to the princess. That person immediately moved aside and opened the way for Lin Feng. He then said, "The princess is yours." Lin Feng was stupefied. He moved towards the princess and looked at the man whose face was covered, and he saw him move towards the 3 remaining survivors. "You're not going to kill him?" coldly asked the last remaining lieutenant while looking at the man, whose face was covered. "There are only 4 of us. Even if we all attack together, we only have a small chance of winning," said the man whose face was covered while moving towards the lieutenant. He then suddenly transformed into a shadow, jumped off his horse and rushed towards the last remaining lieutenant. An extremely strong wind emanated from his hand and crashed into the lieutenant's chest. The lieutenant's heart twitched, his internal organs had been damaged beyond repair by that attack. The lieutenant wanted to speak but he then saw the masked man carrying out a final attack against him. The lieutenant then fell off his horse, dead. Lin Feng looked surprised. Lin Feng looked surprised. The 2 others with their helmets covering their faces also looked at Lin Feng. They peculiar look in their eyes. Lin Feng, the three of us will not fight against you. You can leave, said one of them sounding cold. They had all moved out of Lin Feng's path together. You guys are all right with my decision, right? The two others remained silent and immediately nodded. Let's go, said the leader of the men. Immediately after, they turned around and left. They saw that Lin Feng didn't intend to stop them. Their horses neighed and they then started galloping away at full speed, fearing that Lin Feng might change his mind. But when they had both caught up to the leader of the group, a brutal energy crashed into their bodies. The sound of thunder spread through the atmosphere and blood poured from the two black guards' mouths. Immediately after, another strike of that powerful energy hit them from behind. They could only feel their body go rigid. They tried to release their own energy and move away, but it was already too late. At the moment when they tried to move themselves away, a lethal hand strike pierced both of their chests, killing them in an instant. Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi were astonished. They slowly turned around and looked at the final remaining black guard. They only saw that he was moving towards them. When he arrived in front of Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi, he said, Lin Feng, even though you have become stronger at the critical moment, you are now very weak and cannot fight for much longer. I advise that you to avoid future trouble and to find a place to rest. Huh? Lin Feng narrowed his eyes. He knew that he was very weak at that moment. Indeed, even though Lin Feng's broken bones had started to reassemble themselves and he could fuse with his sword, his bones still hadn't completely recovered. Besides, his internal organs had been severely damaged. Lin Feng perfectly understood that he was in no state to continue fighting. When he saw that the man wanted to leave without killing him, he felt like he was truly too weak. Besides, Lin Feng couldn't understand why that person was willing to help him. Who is that person really? Why was he with the black guards? Who are you? Asked Lin Feng. You don't need to know who I am, Lin Feng. You have a strong determination and willpower, you are fearless, these qualities are engraved deep in your heart and they make you the cultivator that you are today. Not everybody can be like that, many people chose to be scared of dying and suffer in silence, said the man without answering Lin Feng's question. Lin Feng, this war between our two countries is not as simple to understand as you imagine. Behind the curtains, we are just pawns, nobodies. They will sacrifice us at any time to achieve what they desire, like savage animal. This time, you took a risk but it wasn't worth it because nothing was going to happen to the princess, said the man with the helmet still covering his face. His eyes, which were visible, were looking at Lin Feng and looked sincere. Don't forget to not return using the same road you used to come. Not all the Mou army will die during the war, or at least, Mou Jia will not die. Wait until they come back to Mou and then you can go back to Shuiyu. Finally, it is my wish that you will make the Yunhai sect rise once again. When that man finished talking, he turned around and galloped away at full speed. His silhouette gradually disappeared on the horizon. Lin Feng was looking at that silhouette from behind and lights were flashing in his eyes. 1,000 thoughts were flashing through his mind. Make the Yunhai sect rise once again, repeated Lin Feng in a low voice. That man had said that Lin Feng was determined and fearless, that these values were deeply engraved in his heart, and said that many people suffered in silence, scared for their lives. Maybe this person was speaking of himself, suffering in silence to save his own life. That person must have been a former member of the Yunhai sect. Indeed, that person was indeed a former member of the Yunhai sect. Besides, he had chosen to take refuge in the holy courtyard of Shuiyu to save his own life, which is why he said those words. That person had skills as limpid as water, he was extremely strong and had broken through to the 8th Ling Qi layer. In Lin Feng's mind, he could only think of one person. There had been an incredibly strong disciple in the Yunhai sect. Ling Hu. He Shan. That person used to be the first disciple of the Yunhai sect core disciples, Ling Hu Hishan. Lin Feng, this war between our two countries is not as simple to understand as you imagine. Behind the curtains, we are just pawns, nobodies. They will sacrifice us at any time to achieve what they desire, like savage animal. This time, you took a risk but it wasn't worth it because nothing was going to happen to the princess. Lin Feng recalled Ling Hu Hishan's words once again. His heart was pounding. Indeed, Ling Hu Hishan had been at the princess' side, which meant that the 4 men with helmets covering their faces were all students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. Students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu as well as black guards had been working together to secure the princess. People who were meant to be absolute enemies had been collaborating. The leader of the MOU armies was Mo Jia and the leader of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu was Duan Tianlang. When Lin Feng thought about that, cold killing intent invaded his entire body and penetrated into his heart and even his bones. This war was like a chess game. Its outcome was planned from the beginning. The fact that the princess had been kidnapped, the chaos amongst the troops, the lives of a few 100,000 soldiers, everything had been planned from the beginning and was part of their plan. Everything had been planned so that the people behind the curtains could achieve their goals. These people wanted Lin Feng dead, which is why they captured the princess in Lin Feng's presence and had then blamed Lu Tsanglan. That tragedy had led to the death of hundreds of thousands of people. However, Lin Feng had given his best to ruin their plans. He had been unwilling to give up and had made great efforts to find the princess. Was that really worth it though? Fortunately, Lin Feng hadn't died. He had gained enlightenment through battle and had learned how to master sword fusion. He was much stronger now than before. Lin Feng stood there while remaining silent. Finally, he moved and took a deep breath, all his thoughts vanished like smoke. Lin Feng had a clear conscience and had stuck to his beliefs. That was enough. That plot and the conspiracy to take his life had actually helped him to become stronger. His path of cultivation would allow him to reach the clouds and to destroy any plots or conspiracies that came his way. Lin Feng turned around and looked at Duan Xinyi with a cold and indifferent glare. He was absolutely expressionless as if he was looking at a stranger. Lin Feng, said Duan Xinyi when she saw Lin Feng's expression. Lin Feng's cold expression made her heart start to race. She just saw Lin Feng raise his hand, and in a flash, the vines constricting her body were cut down. When he finished, Lin Feng turned around and left, while surprisingly ignoring Duan Xinyi. Initially, she was a good person and was safe inside the capital. But because she decided to come to the battlefield, hundreds of thousands of people had to die. Lin Feng himself had almost died trying to save her. Lin Feng, I didn't know, said Duan Xinyi in a low voice. Her eyes were moist. She had heard Ling Hu Hishan and obviously understood everything he said. She also knew what Lin Feng was thinking at that moment. As a princess, she had played the key role in the conspiracy. How could all these things be unclear to her? She was royalty who could pass the heavy curtains to enter the imperial palace. Besides, Lin Feng had already asked her why she wanted to come to the battlefield even though it wasn't necessary for her to be there and was even dangerous. That conspiracy was obviously the reason why she had come. She could perfectly understand Lin Feng's feelings. Lin Feng continued forward. He didn't look like he intended to stop. He looked steady and firm. Lin Feng, I really didn't know, said Duan Xinyi, tears were flowing from her eyes. She felt a heavy pain gripping her heart. Only a woman in love could feel such a pain within her heart. Maybe she had actually fallen in love. A horse-driven carriage was moving down an ancient road. A horse-driven carriage was moving down an ancient road. 3 horses were pulling the carriage. Behind that carriage, there were many people riding horses and acting as guards. Nii, the person driving the carriage, pulled back on the reins and came to a stop. Then, guards on the right and left of the carriage continued moving forwards. A person was lying on the ground. That person was wearing the armor of a soldier. Fu Bo, his heartbeat is normal, there is no irregularity at all. He's alive but unconscious, said one man to the driver of the carriage while checking the person's body. Move him to the side of the road. We have to hurry, said the driver of the carriage indifferently. The man was about to execute the order, but at that moment, a pair of lily-white hands opened the curtains of the carriage. A delicate face appeared from behind the curtains. It was a beautiful young girl, she was very young. Lights were flashing in her eyes. Fu Bo, how could a soldier end up here lying on the road? Asked the young woman whose voice was clear and limpid. Fu Bo shook his head and said, I'm not sure, but in our country, ordinary soldiers are not that strong. Except for soldiers whose rank is lieutenant or above, the others are not considered strong on the battlefield. That person must be extremely weak, which would explain why he was abandoned on the road. Oh, said the young girl while slightly nodding. A light flashed in her eyes and she said, take him with us in the carriage. Miss, this is not appropriate, said Fu Bo, who was surprised. It doesn't matter, Fu Bo, said the young girl while ignoring him and smiling. She then talked to the man who was standing at the soldier's side and said, carry him over here and put him inside the carriage. That guards glanced at Fu Bo. However, Fu Bo had no choice but to nod. The guards had no other choice but to carry the unconscious soldier into the carriage. The carriage then slowly continued moving forwards. In the carriage, there was delicate young woman and young girl who was about 10 years old. She was also very pretty. Ziling, why did you bring a stranger into the carriage? Asked the young woman. She was curiously looking at the young soldier lying down in the carriage. She could help but frown. Ze, big sister, look, he looks so young, can you guess his age? Said the young beautiful little girl as if she hadn't heard the original question. She looked very curious as well. Ziling glanced at Ze and slightly shook her head. She then looked at the lying young man and frowned. Suddenly, she looked perplexed. What a delicate and handsome young man, thought Ze while sighing. Even though that young man was unconscious, his face was delicate, he had dashing eyebrows and his cheeks looked extremely delicate. His entire body was covered with dust from the road. That young man didn't look like a soldier, why was he wearing armor? Ze, sister, that young man and you seem to be the same age. He's very handsome. You would be a perfect couple, said Ziling. Don't talk nonsense, said Ze. Ze, sister, I'm just joking, I know that your husband would have to be stronger than you. You have already broken through to the third Ling Chi layer, you're a genius. He's very young and he's a soldier, how could he be stronger than you, said Ziling while smiling. Ze was just shaking her head. Ziling, instead of talking about me, you should be talking about your cultivation, especially your sword skills. He laughed. Ziling then said, Ze, sister, why does Zi Qiong suddenly want to get married? I didn't think that he had a girl he liked. When Ze heard Ziling, she frowned and immediately said, the day of the offerings for the gods and ancestors is approaching. Zi Qiong needs to be married to gain access to the forbidden area. Therefore, his wedding is a very normal thing. Concerning the girl, I heard that they've only known each other for a few days. Otherwise, I don't much more than you. A light flashed in Ziling's eyes and then she shook her head as a sign that she didn't understand such complicated things. But at that moment, the young man lying in the carriage moved his finger. Ziling was surprised and said, he's awake. Then, the young man's hand started to move. Immediately after, he opened his eyes. The young man's eyes were big and beautiful, but at that moment, his eyes revealed uncertainty. That young man was Lin Feng. On that day, after the conversation with Duan Xinyi, he left her and walked for a great distance. He didn't get the impression that something was wrong with his body, but suddenly, he fainted and did not know what happened after that. He had no idea what happened. He didn't even know how many days had passed since that moment. Ziling and Ze were surprised when they saw Lin Feng. What a handsome young man. At that moment, his eyes were open as he laid on the floor of the carriage. "Where am I?" asked Lin Feng while looking at the two girls. He looked perplexed. "You're awake. My name is Ziling. You were lying on the road and we accidentally came across you, so we took you into our carriage," said Ziling while blinking unceasingly. She then said, "Oh, by the way, how did you faint on that road? And are you a soldier? What is your military ranking? How strong are you?" Ziling was unceasingly asking questions which caused Lin Feng's mind to spin. He said in a weak voice, "Is it okay if I get up first?" "Oh, okay," said Ziling a bit embarrassed. Immediately after, Lin Feng, who was lying on the floor, stood up and sat down opposite the girl. "My name is Lin Feng. I fainted because I was injured. I am just an ordinary soldier. My strength is..." While talking, Lin Feng tried to gather some of his pure qi, but then, he suddenly looked astonished. He just had the feeling that he was empty inside and there wasn't even a trace of pure qi. What's wrong? Lin Feng's heart was pounding. His eyes were turbulent. He remembered that he had become stronger. He should have become much stronger, but at that moment, he surprisingly couldn't manage to condense any pure qi. There wasn't any pure qi inside of his body any longer. "What's wrong?" asked Ziling when she saw that Lin Feng's facial expression changed so drastically. She then asked, "You were just about to tell us how strong you were." Lin Feng glanced at Ziling and immediately after, he closed his eyes. He could still clearly perceive everything around him. Even without releasing the first layer of his celestial spirit, he was still able to perceive every part of his body, the muscles, the flesh and the blood vessels. He could perfectly sense everything that was happening within his body. If Lin Feng wanted, he could perceive everything that was happening around him to a circumference of 1,000 kilometers, the whole world would become an image within his mind. "Indeed, I have become stronger and it even seems that my bones, flesh and muscles are much stronger than before." Lin Feng opened his eyes and used one hand to violently punch the palm of his other hand. He had gained impressive strength. Even though there was no pure qi, while considering his body's strength, he was much stronger than he was before. That meant that he now had a stronger constitution. However, Lin Feng persistently tried to control pure qi, but something was wrong. It seemed like there was absolutely no pure qi within his body. "What the hell has happened to me?" thought Lin Feng while frowning. He had become stronger but did not have any pure qi. What was that supposed to mean? Could it be that, after he became stronger and mastered his sword fusion, something strange happened to his body? Why would his pure qi have run dry? Lin Feng tried to absorb pure qi into his body again, but it would only circulate within his body, it wouldn't penetrate inside or be absorbed. It seemed like the external world and the inside of his body were completely separated. Whatever he tried, it seemed like the universe did not agree. Lin Feng had never heard of such a condition, let alone seen it. He didn't understand what was happening to him. Lin Feng was firmly frowning for a long time and then tried to relax. His cultivation was unlikely to have been crippled. Maybe it was something good, maybe he had entered an unknown path on the road to cultivation. While thinking that, Lin Feng felt a bit relieved. At that moment, there was no amazing energy inside of him, but it wasn't a bad thing. He still had the qi that an ordinary person who did not practice cultivation would have. He even looked even more handsome. "Why are you not talking?" asked Ziling while looking at Lin Feng after seeing that his facial expression didn't stop changing while he remained silent. Lin Feng raised his head and looked at Ziling. He then said, "It seems like I have no strength at all." "No strength?" sighed Ziling surprised. She had a strange expression on her face. "A piece of trash then," said Zi straightforwardly. She frowned. A person who had no strength was obviously a piece of trash. In the continent, nobody could gain a high place within society if they weren't strong. They would systematically thrown aside even if they were handsome. At that moment, she looked at Lin Feng with disdain. When Lin Feng heard the expression, piece of trash, he raised his head and saw that both girls were looking at him with different looks than before. It made him feel exasperated. When Lin Feng heard the expression, piece of trash, he raised his head and saw that both girls were looking at him with different looks than before. It made him feel exasperated. In the world of cultivation, those who were not strong would only be thrown away. However, some people, even though they thought that way, didn't show what they thought to other people, which was much better than how Ze was behaving. Ziling, let's kick him out of the carriage, said Ze in a cold and detached way. She sounded calm and unscrupulous. At that moment, she only thought about the fact that the person she was looking at was a piece of trash, even though he was handsome. Are you not a soldier? How come you don't practice cultivation? Haven't you at least broken through to the Qi layer? Asked Ziling while looking at Lin Feng. She was looking at him with a strange look. I was injured and now it seems like I don't have the slightest bit of strength, said Lin Feng while shaking his head. He wasn't going to get angry because of Ziyi's words. Lin Feng had just gone through war. He had gone through a great deal of horrible things and seen oceans of blood flowing on the battlefield. His heart had matured and he realized that his previous actions were childish. His temperament had evolved. It would now be difficult for him to be affected by the words of others. Oh, said Ziling while nodding. She was looking at Lin Feng while looking pensive as if she was thinking about a solution for Lin Feng. Ziling, if the people of the mountain village know that we have a piece of trash inside the carriage, they will make fun of us and laugh. Let's kick him out, okay? Said Ze again. She really had no manners, talking about Lin Feng to his face. A piece of trash was nothing to them, so she didn't need to speak in a tactful way. Even if he felt humiliated, it did not matter. Ze, sister, meeting him was fate. There is no need to be so heartless and cruel, said Ziling while shaking her head, and then said, Lin Feng, I will allow you to act as my servant. You will be under my care and you can enter our mountain village. Servant? Lin Feng was astonished. Become her slave? In his heart, he was smiling wryly. He wouldn't have thought that he would be forced into servitude like that, but he was still within the borders of Mou while unable to absorb pure qi. He had no cultivation. If he ventured alone, he would probably encounter a dangerous situation, therefore, it was better for him to act as a servant. If he regained his strength, who would dare treat him like a servant? Lin Feng slightly nodded and didn't express his opinion. Very good, then it is settled, said Ziling while smiling. Ze remained silent while shaking her head. The Ziwei mountain village was surrounded by mountains. It was a quiet and beautiful place. It was situated in the north of Mou. It was a place of great influence and it belonged to the Z clan. It was said that the strongest cultivator of the Z clan was at the Xian Qi layer. Besides, the Z clan was extremely old, even older than the Mou country. However, as time passed, its influence declined. Ziling was the eldest daughter of the Ziwei mountain village clan. Ze had been adopted and raised by Ziling's father. Therefore, in the Ziwei mountain village, Ziling had more authority than Ze, which is why even though Ze wanted to make Lin Feng leave the carriage, if Ziling didn't accept, Ze had no choice but to accept it. The Ziwei mountain village was extremely vast. The place where Ziling lived was picturesque, clear water and green gardens. It was surrounded by a huge garden and emerald bamboo trees. It looked particularly peaceful. At this moment, Lin Feng was holding a broom and was sweeping the courtyard of the garden. However, he wasn't paying attention to the ground at all, he was lost in his own thoughts. He was able to sense the pure qi of heaven and earth, his perception was even clearer and more distinct than before, but he was still unable to absorb it and make it penetrate his body. That strange condition was troubling him so much that his heart started to race as he thought about it. A single leaf was floating on the wind. Lin Feng looked at that leaf and could distinctly perceive where it was going and where it would land on the ground. Lin Feng grabbed the broom with his left hand and raised his right hand, like a sword. he moved it towards the leaf in an attempt to cut it. Even though there was no pure chi and no sword energy, his hand still moved like a sword with incredible strength. However, when Lin Feng's hand got close to the leaf, it just moved away and continued floating through the air. He couldn't touch it and couldn't catch it. It would move away from him every time. Lin Feng could only slice through the air, but not cut the leaf. I cannot cut it. Lin Feng was a bit surprised. The leaf fell onto the ground. A tree leaf was simple, but Lin Feng couldn't touch it. Even though the position of the leaf was perfectly clear in his mind, he was unable to predict its next movements. If he tried to touch the leaf, its trajectory would change. If Lin Feng could control pure chi, it would have been very easy for him to cut a leaf, but at that moment, even though his hand was still like a sword, he was unable to cut the leaf. Even though I am fused with my sword, it seems that it's not enough, as if something is missing, whispered Lin Feng. Even though he was, indeed, stronger than before, Lin Feng had the impression he was in front of a locked door and was only single step away from unlocking it. He was in a complex situation, and if he didn't take the next step, he wouldn't be able to absorb pure chi. I remember on the day when I became stronger, my bones had been broken, my internal organs were severely wounded, my determination had allowed me to make battle energy, sword energy, and ice energy fuse altogether. Like that, I had transformed into a sharp sword. What I was thinking about at that moment was my sword more than the energy attack. I had managed to carry out sword fusion. My determination is what played the decisive role in me becoming stronger, whispered Lin Feng, trying to recall the moment when he gained his strength. I managed to carry out my sword fusion by relying on my spirit, on the first layer of my celestial spirit. It helped become physically stronger and become more aware of the world surrounding me. My spirit enabled me to understand my sword in a much greater detail and allowed me to fuse with my sword. It seems like amongst all the things I understood, there is something that I am missing, as if I do not yet have the requirements to use my current strength, thought Lin Feng while his heart was pounding as if he had just received a glimpse of enlightenment. His spirit was extremely strong and had enabled him to become stronger and reach this unique situation. However, it seemed like that without using the power of his spirit, he wasn't strong enough to use the power. Therefore, because of his special condition, he was unable to absorb pure chi. I use battle energy, ice energy, sword energy, and fuse them together as a sword. It's not battle energy and it's not ice energy. Even though it is a leaf, it follows the force of the wind without being cut. Could I make the energy of heaven and earth fuse with the leaf? Lin Feng was holding the broom and was lost in thought. He was standing in the huge garden facing the bamboo forest while remaining completely motionless. A middle-aged man and Ze stopped walking when they saw Lin Feng in the garden. "Father, this is the piece of trash that we came across last time." Ziling insisted on him coming to the village mountain, to let him take care of the garden and let him live here, explained Ze to the middle-aged man while looking at Lin Feng. At that moment, the middle-aged man was fixedly staring at Lin Feng, looking pensive. "Father, don't you want to kick him out?" said Ze when she saw that the middle-aged man remained silent. "Stop talking," said the middle-aged man while staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng was standing there remaining motionless, but dust was flowing around him as if there was a vortex created around Lin Feng. It was very subtle, it was impossible to notice it without paying extreme attention. Ze glanced at Lin Feng and didn't know what her father was looking at. Her eyes were filled with disdain, and then she didn't look at Lin Feng again. A piece of trash wasn't worth her attention. "Father, I'm going to call Ziling," said Ze to the middle-aged man. Her father ignored her. She shook her head and moved towards the house in the middle of the garden. After she left, something strange happened. The vortex surrounding Lin Feng was becoming faster and more violent. Besides, Lin Feng had a marvelous expression on his face. At that moment, Lin Feng seemed to be fusing with heaven and earth. The middle-aged man was amazed. "How strange," whispered the middle-aged man. At that moment, Lin Feng was giving him an extraordinary impression. How strange, whispered the middle-aged man. At that moment, Lin Feng was giving him an extraordinary impression. When looking at Lin Feng's back, he had the feeling he was looking at a celestial being. Lin Feng made his heartbeat race. Was Lin Feng really the person Zi was talking about? Has he come to the Ziwei mountain village to become a servant, or is it because he doesn't care about what we think of him and seeks to advance his cultivation, thought the middle-aged man. On the continent, it wasn't uncommon for disciples belonging to powerful clans to practice cultivation on a journey. Some of them went to war and gained experience on the battlefield, while others degraded themselves to become slaves to test their determination, to change their state of mind. The middle-aged man thought that Lin Feng probably belonged to the second category. Otherwise, that young man would unlikely be standing there while controlling the qi of heaven and earth. How could he become a servant and clean the garden in a small mountain village? The middle-aged man took a step and then started walking slowly towards Lin Feng. However, he was walking very carefully, trying not to make any sound. He was afraid that he would interrupt Lin Feng. At that moment, Lin Feng's state of mind was as limpid as water. He was absolutely lost in his thoughts, not paying attention to his surroundings. On that day, when I reached my current state, around my body was battle energy, ice energy and sword energy, before I made all the energy fuse together. Why did it become sword energy? Why didn't it become ice energy or battle energy? Lin Feng kept asking himself thousands of questions. A sword can have sword force, a blade can have blade force, a sword can be used to carry out an energy attack just like a blade. When a cultivator masters the sword, they can fuse with their sword. When they master the blade, they can fuse together with their blade. Well, what about the other types of energy? For example, a moment ago, the leaf was floating on the wind. However, a leaf has leaf force, when the wind controlling the leaf has wind force. Force is present in all things and can be used for energy attacks and fused. Swords and blades are not the only things which produce force. It should be possible to fuse with all of the 10,000 things of creation. Lin Feng felt like he had realized something. He suddenly gained enlightenment. Lin Feng raised his hand in the air and slashed it through the air, like a shadow. His movement was invisible. Suddenly, a leaf was cut into hundreds of pieces which floated through the air. Even though Lin Feng was closing his eyes, he had a feeling of absolute control, as if he could control everything around him. He had the same feeling as when he was using his spirit, but it was different to some extent. When he used his spirit, his entire world became darkness, but at that moment, it seemed like he had fused together with the earth. He could clearly perceive everything that was happening around him. In the manuals of cultivation, it was said that cultivation depended on your awareness level and your advancement. As far as awareness is concerned, if you wanted to open the door which lead to the truth of the universe, first, you had to become one with the earth. Become one with the earth, thought Lin Feng. He opened his eyes and a faint smile appeared on his face. He wasn't overjoyed and didn't look arrogant either. At that moment, Lin Feng looked ordinary yet magnificent. He had reached another dimension of cultivation, which was in perfect harmony with his path of cultivation. Lin Feng turned around and looked at the middle-aged man who wasn't standing very far from him. Lin Feng smiled at him. That smile made the middle-aged man feel unworthy. "Young cultivator," said the middle-aged man. His voice was filled with respect. Lin Feng looked at the middle-aged man and nodded as a sign of politeness. "Young cultivator, my daughters are extremely rash and immature. I, Zinan, have come here to apologize. I hope that you can forgive my daughters," said the middle-aged man while slightly bowing. How could his daughters call this young man a nobody? Even though his adopted daughter had talent, her behavior was unacceptable in front of such a talented young man. "My name is Lin Feng. I do not blame them, but the world we live in. Coming to this village was my own decision," replied Lin Feng indifferently. For having been able to penetrate into the dimension Earth fusion, Lin Feng should be thankful to Ziling and Zi for having brought him to the Ziwei mountain village. He was a servant there for a few days, while sweeping the garden, his heart felt peaceful and serene. He could calmly occupy himself with his current cultivation problems, which enabled him to break through the final barrier. If Ziling hadn't picked him up on the roadside, Lin Feng didn't know what might have happened. Penetrating into the Earth fusion dimension was an extremely rare thing. If Lin Feng had really penetrated into it, it was by relying on luck. When Zinan heard Lin Feng, he was sure that he had guessed correctly. Lin Feng was certainly the disciple of a powerful clan who had left home to practice cultivation. There was absolutely no doubt about it. Is there a cultivation room in the village? If you have one, please let me use it, said Lin Feng. Of course, immediately replied Zinan and then added, young cultivator, please follow me. While talking, the middle-aged man started walking and leading the way. He and Lin Feng was walking towards the bamboo forest. It was a very mysterious place. The pure chi of heaven and earth was in a dense fog floating above the ground. The chi was very thick and powerful here. Zinan said, young cultivator, this is the best cultivation location of the Ziwei mountain, which is why we built the village here. Young cultivator, you can immediately go inside. Besides, there are many purity stones inside, you can use however many you need. Zinan was very generous. Having the opportunity to get acquainted with such a rare young genius was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Lin Feng slightly nodded and went into the room. The pure chi of heaven and earth condensed into a white fog. Lin Feng wouldn't have thought that a place like Ziwei would have such a great place for cultivation. When Lin Feng arrived inside, he saw a myriad of purity stones on the ground. He sat cross-legged and entered into a tranquil state of mind. Suddenly, Lin Feng fused with the earth and a colossal amount of pure chi started penetrating into his body at a shocking speed. With eagerness, Lin Feng absorbed as much of the pure chi that was rushing into him as possible. Lin Feng didn't spend too much time in the cultivation room. 1 hour later, he left the room. When he came out, Zinan was sitting on the ground waiting for Lin Feng. Young cultivator, said Zinan while standing up. He had a smile on his face. At that moment, there was nothing strange about Lin Feng, as if he was the exact same person that entered the room. However, Lin Feng was shrouded in mystery. Let's go, said Lin Feng. The two of them left and went back towards the garden. Zi and Ziling were looking for their father everywhere. At that moment, by coincidence, they turned around and saw their father. When they saw that he was with Lin Feng, they couldn't help but be surprised. Zi shouted, Father! Ziling and I have been looking for you everywhere. Dad, we are getting ready to leave, said Ziling while smiling. She then looking at Lin Feng and said, Lin Feng, you can tidy this place and then make preparations for our departure. How dare you, shouted Zinan. Ziling was slightly surprised. She then saw that Zinan was staring at her and was about to add something, but Lin Feng spoke first. Miss, where are you going? Our clan also controls the government of the Ziwei. In a few days, the young master Ziqiong will get married, and because we are related, we obviously have to go and congratulate him. This is why I asked Ziling and Zi to prepare to leave for the Zi government, replied Zinan before either of the girls could respond. Lin Feng nodded to indicate that he understood. Lin Feng understood that the young master of their clan was going to get married and they had to go pay respects. Daddy, we've heard that Ziqiong's wife is very beautiful, much more beautiful than all the women in the clan. Besides, she's from Xueyu. I also heard that she did not want to marry him. Is this really true? Said Ziling while shaking her head. Her eyes were filled with curiosity while looking towards Zinan. Don't talk nonsense, said Zinan while frowning. Immediately after, he said in a low voice, there are some rumors which say that the beautiful woman is the princess of Xueyu, but it is not confirmed. We cannot talk about this on the outside. Oh, I see, said Ziling while blinking. As far as Lin Feng was concerned, he was shaking. The Princess of Shuiyu? Lin Feng knew that there was only one princess in Shuiyu and that was Duan Xinyi. Could it be her? Lin Feng frowned. On that day, Lin Feng had stormed away from Duan Xinyi and didn't know what had happened to her. Besides, from what Zinan was saying, that woman was the Princess of Shuiyu. She was beautiful and besides, it seemed like she was being forced into the marriage. The chances of her being Duan Xinyi were high. Master, I will come with you, said Lin Feng to Zinan. Zinan was surprised. He looked at Lin Feng with a serious look, he was obviously not going to refuse. Could it be that you want to go because you heard that the woman was very beautiful? Is it why you are so impatient to leave, said Zi with a smile on her face while looking at Lin Feng before adding, but the future husband is Zi Qiong, you are only a servant. Your social status is way too low. Don't even have such thoughts or you might die, the best thing you can do is continue your life as a lowly servant. Shut up, shouted Zinan and immediately looked at Lin Feng, young cultivator, if you want to go then you can take my place. I hope that you will look after my two girls until they arrive. Zinan's logic was simple. He was hoping that, by spending some time alone with his girls, Lin Feng would get along with them. Zinan's logic was simple. He was hoping that, by spending some time alone with his girls, Lin Feng would get along with them. Ziling was a few years younger than Lin Feng. Zi and Lin Feng were about the same age. Even though they couldn't be considered as very beautiful, they were cute, besides, they were quite strong. If Lin Feng could get along with them, that would be a nice thing. Of course, even if he didn't manage to get along with them, he could still ensure their protection. What could he have against them traveling together? However, at that moment, Zi and Ziling were surprised. They were looking at their father, Zinan, in a strange way. Their father was calling Lin Feng, young cultivator. Dad, what did you call him? Asked Ziling, who was very surprised. Usually, her father almost never scolded her, and at that moment, he had already scolded her twice because of Lin Feng. Ziling, Zi, your behavior is inadmissible. Lin Feng's cultivation level is much more advanced than yours. The fact that he is patient and accommodating with you is just due to his kind and magnanimous personality. You just don't know how to distinguish good from bad. Daring to treat him as a servant, you are really shameless. Zinan scolded his two daughters again. His words were profound and meaningful. He then said, this time, I will let Lin Feng go with you. You two should ask Lin Feng for advice and listen to what he tells you. You should make sure to stay friendly with him. His cultivation level is much more advanced than ours, said Ziling while staring at Lin Feng. She was extremely curious. She then said, Father, are really not mistaken. Father, you shouldn't trust him. He is a nobody, said Zi, who didn't believe her father's words. She was a genius and had already broken through to the third Ling Qi layer. Besides, she was about the same age as Lin Feng, so it was impossible for him to be stronger than her. Shut up. How dare you doubt my words, shouted Zinan, who had no alternative but to shout. He then continued, hurry up and go pack your things, get ready to leave. Humph. Zi poked out her tongue and immediately dragged Ziling to leave. While looking at the two girls leave, Zinan shook his head and he then looked at Lin Feng with a wry smile on his face. Young cultivator, my daughters are naughty and mischievous, I hope that you will not take offense. Lin Feng slightly smiled and shook his head indicating that he wasn't offended. Zinan didn't seem to feel at ease. Could it be that Lin Feng's cultivation level is so high that he does not care about status and doesn't care about the words of normal people? Ziling and Zi just packed a few clothes and the necessities of travel. Outside of the Ziwei mountain village, Ziling, Zi and Lin Feng were riding on 3 Qian Li Shui horses. As Zinan had said, only the three of them were going to the Zi government. Initially, He thought he had to go to pay his respects, but then he thought that the people of Z government would understand if they saw a talented young cultivator with his 2 daughters. Lin Feng, young cultivator, I must inconvenience you to look after my 2 girls, said Z Nan in a low voice. Lin Feng slightly nodded and said, I will ensure their safety until we arrive at the Z government. Lin Feng didn't mention anything about a return journey in Z Nan noticed, but he said nothing. He just nodded. If Lin Feng got along with his daughters on the journey, he would come back with them. If he didn't get along with them, he wouldn't. Daddy, Ze and I are together, could anything bad happen? We're going now, said Ziling while turning her head around. Immediately after, the horses started galloping. Ze and Lin Feng were in the front, Ziling was behind them. Lin Feng, what did you tell my father for him to trust you so much? Asked Ze while galloping right next to Lin Feng. I didn't say anything, said Lin Feng indifferently. He didn't even glance at her, which made Ze groan coldly. Sister, I can see that Daddy thinks highly of him, he's trying to make you guys into a couple, said Ziling from behind while smiling. I will not get married to a piece of trash, said Ze while whipping her horse to move ahead of Lin Feng. Lin Feng, as before, looked calm and indifferent. At that moment, he was still wondering if the woman who was going to marry Zi Qiong was really Duan Xinyi. The Ziwei village mountain was a 2-day journey from the Zi government, and Zi Qiong's wedding ceremony was taking place in 3 days. Boom! 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 Lightning illuminated the entire atmosphere as it started raining heavily. The road of the Golden Z mountain was becoming wet and muddy. The Z government was situated on the Golden Z mountain, which was part of a chain of mountains. At that moment, at the foot of the Golden Z mountain, there was a thatched hut. The 3 people on their Qianli Shui horses rushed over to the hut, jumped off their horses and rushed into the thatched hut, which turned out to be very spacious. That damned weather. We arrive at the foot of the mountain and it starts raining heavily. Initially, we should have been able to arrive at the Z government and would have been able to sleep in comfortable beds before the wedding, cursed Ze, who was wet from head to foot. Her clothes were sticking close to her skin, which revealed her already developed figure. One could clearly see her alluring figure. At that moment, Ze suddenly had the impression that she was being observed. She frowned and looked inside the thatched hut. 3 people were sitting on the ground. These people, when they saw her enter, started staring at her in an evil way. At that moment, Ziling and Lin Feng entered the room as well. They were, just like Ze, completely soaked. Besides, Lin Feng was wearing a silver mask to cover his face. Ziling was feeling cold and remained silent. When she saw the evil expression on the face of the 3 people, she felt a bit scared. Ze also noticed that these 3 people were staring at them. She coldly looked at them and even released some cold qi. These people were certainly not good people. But she remained vigilant. After all, they were not in the Ziwei village mountain anymore and had to be careful. She dragged Ziling to the other side of the hut and sat down. Lin Feng picked up some wood in a thatched hut and piled it up in front of Ze and Ziling. He immediately lit a fire. That would be a good way to get dry and warm. He was unceasingly putting wood in the fire to maintain it. These 3 people looked at Lin Feng, who was lowering his head taking care of the fire. He seemed like he hadn't even seen these 3 people. So useless. I really don't understand what Daddy was thinking when he decided not to come and to let that piece of trash come with us, said Ze, thinking that Lin Feng could do nothing but simple chores. Instead of thanking him for tending the fire, she was just making fun of him while her eyes were filled with disdain. She had an unfavorable opinion of Lin Feng and it wasn't going to change, no matter what he did. Ultimately, she despised Lin Feng because she thought that Lin Feng was weak, but if she had known that Lin Feng was stronger than her own father, how would have she reacted? Ze didn't know that all the things she said didn't affect Lin Feng because Lin Feng did not put her in his eyes and did not care about her at all. He was, of course, not going to pay attention to her words. Of course, he also didn't have a favorable opinion of Ze. "Big brother, what do you think about these two girls?" said one of the three people while looking at Ze and Ziling. His evil smile resonated in the area. "I like the one who's acting coldly. Nice chest, nice bottom. She looks mature enough. It would be a real pleasure to sleep with her. I just don't know if she'll keep acting so cold while in bed." The man looked fascinating. He was staring at Ze whose clothes were completely wet. Her clothes were so wet and sticking to her skin that her nipples were erect. That was, indeed, an alluring sight for this man. When Ze heard what the men were saying, her face turned even colder. She was staring at them and released a cold energy. "Big brother, that one doesn't seem to be any fun. I still prefer the small one. Not only is she cute but her figure is also not bad," said the one who hadn't talked yet. Lust was flashing in his eyes while staring at Ziling. These three people were loudly chatting as if they had no restraint. They were staring at Ze and Ziling like a starving man would look at food. As far as Lin Feng was concerned, nobody paid any attention to him. Ziling and Ze got closer to each other. Even though they were quite aggressive, in such a situation, they were still feeling a bit scared. "How shameless, try and speak that way again." Ze was releasing her chi. She stood up and looked at the three people. Nice figure, we can even see the shape of her breasts." The man who was being called "Big Brother" by the two others was staring at Ze's body as if he was looking at a naked woman. "Three evil alpacas, you really are extremely perverted, your reputation is well justified." At the moment when Ze was getting angry, a cold and detached voice interrupted them. Immediately, they saw a young man wearing golden clothes enter the thatched hut. "Three evil alpacas, you really are extremely perverted, your reputation is well justified." At the moment when Ze was getting angry, a cold and detached voice interrupted them. Immediately, they saw a young man wearing golden clothes enter the thatched hut. Even though it was raining heavily outside, that young man's clothes were magnificent and completely dry. He looked clean and handsome. He was holding a fan in his hand. He looked elegant and had just come from a luxurious carriage. The three evil alpacas, when Ze and Ziling heard that name, their facial expressions immediately changed. These three bastards surprisingly were the three evil alpacas. No wonder that they looked so evil. In the region surrounding the Golden Z Mountain, these three disgusting brothers were known for their extreme perversion. They were known for cruelly and violently molesting young girls. If Ze and Ziling had been their target, the outcome would have been unimaginable. "Who are you?" coldly asked the three evil alpacas while looking at that young man. "While Ziqiong's big ceremony is close, you go out and hunt young girls, right?" said the young man while raising his head and smiling coldly. He then moved towards Lin Feng's side, bent down and shook his fan above the fire grow fierce. "You are a man too, how come you are not helping these two girls when they are being humiliated?" coldly said the young man in golden clothes to Lin Feng while smiling. He sounded arrogant and conceited. Lin Feng raised his head and glanced at the young man. He was about as old as Lin Feng. He looked quite handsome. He seemed to come from a wealthy family. It was obvious at first glance that he was wealthy and considered everyone beneath his notice. The young man in golden clothes was smiling warmly but looked arrogant and had a mocking attitude. Lin Feng didn't reply to him, he continued feeding the fire. However, he didn't have a favorable opinion of that young man. If he wanted to be in the limelight, why did he need to go out of his way to humiliate Lin Feng? Why would you care about what the three of us are doing? If you don't want us to hurt you, it's best for you is to leave now, said the three evil alpacas coldly while staring at the young man. The young man didn't even look at them. They still felt a bit wary when seeing the young man disregard them. The young man in golden clothes glanced at them and a mocking smile appeared on his face. The three evil alpacas are vile, they are 30 years old and don't practice their cultivation. They just spend their time with young girls all day. The elder brother has broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer while the two others brothers have broken through to the third Ling Qi layer. In their current life, all they can amount to is bandits. The three evil alpacas narrowed their eyes and evilly looked at that young man. By meddling in our business, your intention is to show these two pretty girls that you are hero, right? Who doesn't love beautiful women? I am no exception, but I also cannot ignore people in distress. Besides, if I have the opportunity to rescue some beautiful girls, of course, I will seize that opportunity, said the young man while looking at Ziyi and Ziling in a charming way. He had a warm and tender smile on his face. He slightly nodded towards them. Ziyi and Ziling's hearts started beating faster. That young man was so handsome. They were wondering how strong he was. Since it was your decision, don't blame us for being cold-blooded. Two of the three evil alpacas stood up and slowly walked towards the young man. Suddenly, a violent energy emerged from them and moved straight towards the young man. Ziyi and Ziling were staring at the two brothers and then looked at the young man to see how he was going to react. At that moment, the third brother suddenly threw himself at Ziling, looking like he had planned this surprise attack much earlier. He was very quickly approaching Ziling. Be careful, said Ziyi when she saw the third brother move towards Ziling and grab her. Her facial expression drastically changed. Ziling had only broken through to the Ling Qi layer, she couldn't compete with the three brothers. Besides, at that moment, Lin Feng, who was calmly sitting on the ground, raised his head. There was an extremely sharp and cold expression in his eyes. At that moment, Lin Feng raised his hand. However, at the same time, a magnificent golden sword twinkled in the atmosphere. The light it diffused made it look like it was raining gold. It was dazzling and full of splendor. That sword light was gorgeous. That light then suddenly enveloped the third brother's body. Immediately after, a horrible shriek spread through the atmosphere. The third brother's body fell down onto the ground. He hadn't paid attention for a brief moment and ended up being struck by the attack. A myriad of injuries, caused by the golden light, appeared on his body. Ziling's eyes were wide open, she was still nervous. How dangerous. But that sword, how gorgeous. Ziyi was stupefied as well. She was blankly staring at the corpse lying on the floor. It wasn't only the third brother who had fallen down onto the floor. The second brother had also collapsed and a myriad of wounds had appeared on his body. The young man was way too quick. They hadn't even seen him attack, but two people were already dead. How strong. And that sword skill, Ziyi was looking at the young man and her eyes were filled with admiration. That young man was extraordinary and extremely strong. She adored him already. Golden Rain Sword, the golden rain that fills the sky, you are Lin Haojie. The big brother of the three evil alpacas was astonished. He also looked slightly scared. Lin Haojie, also known as Golden Rain Lin Haojie. Surprisingly, it's him. Ziyi and Ziling were surprised when they heard that name. Lin Haojie was very famous in that region. Zi Qiong, of the Zi government, was his good friend. Even though he was young, he had already broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer. Besides, because he was a sword master, he easily killed cultivators of the fourth Ling Qi layer. Outstanding young men like him were rare. You taught us a good lesson, I'm off. The big brother of the three evil alpacas was shaking and rushed towards the exit of the thatched hut. He was extremely quick. But Lin Haojie's sword was even faster. The sword rain fell down and the body of the big brother collapsed before it reached the exit. He was motionless on the floor. When Lin Haojie saw the body on the floor, a smile filled with satisfaction appeared on his face. He then put back his sword in its sheath with grace and elegance. Do you two beautiful girls plan to go to Golden Z Mountain as well? asked Lin Haojia while looking at Zi and Ziling with a warm and soft smile on his face. He was looking at them in a very seductive way. Yes, said Zi while nodding in a delicate way. Her voice was soft as well. Coming across each other today was fate. I am lucky to have met such beautiful girls today. However, it is now late and getting dark, the rain has stopped as well. I will not disturb you, have a good rest, said Lin Haojia while smiling. Immediately after, he turned around and left as elegantly and gracefully as he entered. But when he arrived at the door, he started walking slower and said, considering that two beautiful girls like you are staying overnight in here, don't let useless cowards near you as they might try something. While talking, Lin Haojia continued walking towards the exit. Immediately after, they heard his horse neigh, he had already left. As far as the useless coward was concerned, Lin Haojia obviously meant Lin Feng. When they saw him leave, Zi and Ziling looked like they were disappointed. Zi, sister, we haven't thanked him yet. Ziling suddenly sighed and Zi slightly shook her head while saying, do you think that Lin Haojia is that kind of person who expects something like a thanks? You're right, said Ziling while slightly nodding. He's a really outstanding young man. It's nothing like him, surprisingly he wears a mask because he doesn't dare let people see his fear, said Zi mockingly while glancing at Lin Feng. Lin Feng continued feeding the fire with wood and said in a cold tone, he's not as good as you two think. What gives you the right to speak about other people? If he hadn't been here, some bad things could have happened to us. You think that you could have escaped unharmed? I really don't understand why our father made you come with us. When Zi heard Lin Feng criticize Lin Haojia, she couldn't help but be disgusted. She already had a crush on Lin Haojia. Absolutely, Lin Feng, you should be thankful to Lin Haojia, said Ziling. Swords were also her specialty. I owe him nothing, he hasn't done anything for me. Besides, you owe him nothing either. He hasn't done anything which deserves gratitude, said Lin Feng as calm as always. As far as Lin Haojia is concerned, maybe what he had done looked great in the eyes of the two girls, but in Lin Feng's opinion, that young man was too arrogant, he attempted to humiliate Lin Feng and considered everyone else beneath his notice. Not only that but he also thought he was better than everyone else. You're really hideous, Lin Haojia, and you have the same family name but you have nothing in common. Now, get out of the hut, said Zi while following what Lin Haojia said before he left the hut. If you want me to go, I don't care, but I would like to warn you that things are not always as they appear. I will prove that before I leave. Lin Feng stood up, looked at the big brother of the evil alpacas, who was lying on the floor, and said, hey you, how much longer are you going to play dead? Zi and Ziling were astonished when they heard Lin Feng. Zi and Ziling were astonished when they heard Lin Feng. Lin Feng could talk to the dead. But a second later, the two girls were dumbstruck. They saw that the big brother, who was lying on the floor, suddenly moved and started crawling. He turned his head around and looked at Lin Feng in a cold and evil way. The evil alpaca's big brother hadn't died at all. He had just been injured, nothing more. A moment before, he hadn't released the slightest bit of qi and had been holding his breath, feigning death. That little boy is right. Lin Haojia is strong, but way too arrogant. He thinks that everything will go as he plans it. He didn't even notice that he hadn't killed me. His opinion of himself is way too high, said the big brother, sounding cold and detached. He agreed with Lin Feng. You are lucky that I was pretending to be dead, said the big brother, and then looked at Lin Feng while saying coldly, but, Lin Haojia has left now. You three are now my toys, you, the little boy, I'm not interested in you, but these two girls will accompany to console me after my brother's deaths. Zi and Ziling's expression changed. The big brother had broken through to the fourth Ling Qi layer. Even if he was injured, they still couldn't compete with him. Die boy, said the big brother while immediately attacking. He raised his fist and his fist bombarded the atmosphere, moving straight towards Lin Feng. At that moment, Lin Feng slowly raised his hand, then rapidly pierced through the air like a meteor. When the glow from his strike disappeared, the big brother's forehead was covered with blood. He looked at Lin Feng, his eyes were filled with resentment before he died. Was Lin Feng really lucky that he was playing dead? You and Lin Haojie are equally as arrogant, said Lin Feng indifferently. While standing at the same place, he said slowly, if Lin Haojie hadn't stepped in, nothing would have happened to you girls anyway. Therefore, you don't owe him anything. Remember that, things are not always as they seem. It's exactly the same for him, he was pretending to be dead, but was actually waiting for his opportunity. When Lin Feng finished talking, he immediately started walking towards the exit of the thatched hut. In the blink of an eye, his silhouette disappeared like a ghost. When Ziyi and Ziling saw Lin Feng disappear, they were astonished. Lin Feng had just killed the big brother, he had proved that he could protect them. Even if Lin Haojie hadn't attacked, nothing would have happened to them. As far as what Lin Feng's last words, they were deep and profound. Things were not always as they seemed, just like Lin Haojie, who was showing a certain aspect of his personality, but in the end wasn't showing his true colors. The same was true for Lin Feng. The two girls despised him, thought that he was weak. But in the end, with a simple attack, he could kill a cultivator of the fourth Ling Qi layer. Ziyi's sister, Lin Feng seems extremely strong, whispered Ziling after remaining silent for a moment while staring at the corpses on the floor. He's just extremely arrogant. If he was as strong as he said, a moment ago, why did he wait for Lin Haojie to stop them? Why didn't he take the initiative? Besides, when Lin Haojie was here, Lin Feng didn't dare say a word against him. Lin Haojie is much stronger than him and Lin Feng was clearly afraid of him. His heart is just filled with jealousy, said Ziyi in a bad mood. She remembered Lin Haojie's softness and tenderness, her heart was still beating faster when thinking about that. Lin Feng certainly had nothing to do with Lin Haojie. But he just attacked once with his hand and killed a cultivator of the fourth Ling Qi layer. Besides, that resplendent glow looked like it came from a sword, said Ziling with lights unceasingly flashing in her eyes. She was making great efforts to try and remember Lin Feng's attack. It's only because the big brother was too negligent. The big brother was pretending to be dead in front of Lin Haojie but didn't care when in front of Lin Feng. It is obvious at a glance who is strong and who is weak. Besides, do you think that glow looked more majestic and more powerful than Lin Haojie's golden rain sword, said Ziyi as stubborn as before. However, all her reasoning seemed to be flawed. Outside of the hut, a strong wind was blowing and penetrated into the hut. The fire that Lin Feng lit went out because of the strong wind. In a flash, the thatched hut became dark and cold. Ziyi and Ziling's heart started pounding. Immediately after, they firmly grabbed each other's hands. They realized that there was cold sweat on the palms of both of their hands. Ziyi, sister, actually, if Lin Feng was here, it would be much better, said Ziling in a small voice. She had just realized that she had underestimated Lin Feng. Ziyi had criticized Lin Feng for having lit a fire and they both now realized that without it, it was very cold. Ziling, we can go up the mountain tonight, said Ziyi surprising Ziling. Ziyi then continued, Lin Haojie is also going up now, isn't he? If we leave now, we may have a chance of catching up with him. What about Lin Feng? What, do you care about him? Said Ziyi coldly. Alright, let's go, said Ziling immediately after. The two girls left the hut and immediately jumped on their Qian Li Shui horses. They immediately started galloping up the Golden Z mountain. A short time after they left the hut, Lin Feng appeared on a horse and followed them. On the top of the Golden Z mountain, there was a majestic palace, which was famous within that region. It was the location of the Z government. In the Z government, there was someone who had broken through to the Xian Qi layer. In Mou and Shuiyu, people had the same opinion, a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer could be defined as an extremely strong cultivator. Even members of the monarchy would consider them as cultivators worthy of respect. Cultivators of the Xian Qi layer were rare. Outside of the Z government palace, there were two huge pillars which had a huge wooden board across with an inscription. The two words, Z government, was engraved in huge letters on this wooden board. At that moment, Ze and Ziling were approaching these two huge pillars. Lin Feng was calmly following them. The three of them were galloping at full speed on the mountain road, but it was pitch black outside. They had needed 2 hours to climb the mountain. "We are from the Ziwei mountain, here are our invitation cards," said Ze while taking out invitation cards and handing them over to the guards. The guards opened the cards and saw that they were from Ziwei village. They then nodded and let them pass. The three of them entered the vast and immense palace. It was so huge that they didn't know where to go. Ze and Ziling, even though they were blood related to the people of the Z government, had never gone there before. It was their first time. Being blood related to the Z government was nothing special. The really strong and powerful family members were all disciples of the main clan. Besides, even though people were passing them, Ze and Ziling knew nobody. Besides, as it was still late at night, they didn't have a place to rest and had no choice but to aimlessly wander around the palace. "Master Lin, please come this way." At that moment, in the distance, two silhouetted were speaking as they walked through the palace. Ze and Ziling raised their heads and looked in that direction. The person who had just been called Master Lin was Lin Haojie. "Master Lin," shouted Ze while looking at him. Her voice was filled with joy and surprise. Lin Haojie looked in their direction and immediately saw Ze and Ziling. A tender and soft smile appeared on his handsome and delicate face. He walked over to them and said, "It seems like I, Lin Haojie, am very lucky to meet you girls again." "Master Lin, my name is Ze," said Ze while pretending to be shy. "Master Lin, is that your friend?" When the girl who was leading Lin Haojie saw that he knew Ze, she couldn't help but ask. "Yes, she is," replied Lin Haojie while nodding. "So that's how it is, Miss Ze, may I ask you where you are staying?" asked the girl, when she heard that she was Lin Haojie's friend. She remained polite as she was one of the maids of the palace. Lin Haojie was Zi Qiong's good friend and Zi Qiong was the heir to the Z government. Besides, Lin Haojie was also very strong and came from a wealthy family. Since he knew the people from the Z government, he was respected by the servants. "Where?" Ze felt awkward. She saw that Ziling was getting angry and said, "We are related to the Z government, we are from the Ziwei mountain village. We have come to pay our respects to Zi Qiong. We don't know where exactly we're going to stay yet." "Ziwei mountain village," whispered the maid. Immediately after, she smiled as if she understood. She said, "Since you are friends of Lin Haojie, I will help you with your accommodation issue." If they had just come to pay respects to Zi Qiong, the maid wouldn't have helped them find accommodation. The three of them had arrived so late in the night. Whether they were blood related to the Z government or not didn't matter. Besides, she had also ignored the fact that they were from the Ziwei mountain village. That didn't give them a high status. Them being friends with Lin Haojie was much more important than them being from the Ziwei mountain village. It granted them a much higher status. She also had to give Lin Haojie face and help his friends. "No need. Tomorrow is the big wedding ceremony, which we will both be attending. There is space in my room. I would have nothing against letting two beautiful girls sleep in my room tonight," said Lin Haojie with a big smile on his face. He, once again, ignored Lin Feng. "It is not very convenient," said Ze in a soft voice. She didn't sound like she was refusing, it sounded more like she wanted to accept his offer. Lin Haojie was surprised. When he saw that she was acting shy, a smile appeared on his face. It is not very convenient, said Ze in a soft voice. She didn't sound like she was refusing, it sounded more like she wanted to accept his offer. Lin Haojie was surprised. When he saw that she was acting shy, a smile appeared on his face. If Miss Ze doesn't like it or has doubts in regard to my personality, I can also give you the entire mansion and I will spend the night outside. That is absolutely no problem, said Imo Haojie sounding righteous and awe-inspiring. No, of course not, what you proposed is perfect, hastily replied Ze. Ziling and Lin Feng were stupefied. But Lin Haojie immediately smiled and said, so I understand that you're accepting my offer. If it is too inconvenient for you, please tell me, said Ze while lowering her head in a shy fashion. What are you talking about? It is a great pleasure for me, said Lin Haojie while smiling. Ze, sister, how could accept to spend the night in a stranger's room, said Ziling in a low voice while firmly shaking her sister's hand. Ziling, young men like Master Lin are rare. Do you think that he is not trustworthy? Let's go together, said Ze. Ignorant, said a cold and detached voice. It came from Lin Feng. At that moment, Lin Feng was looking at Lin Haojie. He said in a cold and detached way, at the foot of the mountain, you said that they shouldn't let me stay in the thatched hut because I might try something and now you're inviting them to go to your place. Don't you think that you might try something? Isn't that what outstanding and handsome young men of high status do? Lin Haojie was stupefied. He coldly looked at Lin Feng. Immediately after, he smiled and said, could it be that you think that you could be compared with the likes of me? Ridiculous, said Lin Feng. As if having a high social status could give you the right to mislead young girls. Humph. Lin Haojie groaned coldly. He looked at Ze and said, Miss Ze, since that is the case, you can forget my offer, goodbye. When he finished talking, Lin Haojie started to leave. Master Lin, wait, shouted Ze while running after him. She said, I obviously don't agree with him. Ze turned her head around and coldly looked at Lin Feng. She then immediately said to Ziling, sister, let's go together. I'm not going, said Ziling while shaking her head. All right. Then be careful that he does not try anything, replied Ze while looking at Lin Feng and then ran after Lin Haojie. Lin Feng looked at Ze's disappearing silhouette. He was exasperated. He had warned her over and over again, but since Ze was stubborn, Lin Feng had no other solution. He was also done with the task which Si Nan had given. He promised to make sure the girls would be safe until they reached the Z governmental palace. Why are you not going with her? Asked Lin Feng. Maybe you are right. Things are not always as they appear to be. Even though Lin Haojie is handsome, extraordinary and very strong, he might be very hypocritical, said Ziling in a low voice while pouting and gazing into the distance. Well then, are you not going to listen to your sister's words and be careful of me? Asked Lin Feng while slightly laughing. Lin Haojie was, indeed, very hypocritical. Ziling turned her head and looked at Lin Feng. She chuckled and said, but if you meant us harm, you had an opportunity down there in the thatched hut, why would you wait for us to arrive at the Z government palace? Lin Feng was surprised by her pure smile. The corner of her mouth had curved into a gentle smile. Things were not always as they appeared, especially when it came to her. She had a cold and standoffish personality which actually hid a soft and innocent heart. Her smile was quite marvelous to behold. Even though it was a simple invitation, Ze was really too innocent and naive, she didn't understand that it was a trap. But don't misunderstand me, even though you are not that weak, I, Ziling, will only marry with an extremely strong sword cultivator. I will never be interested in someone like you, said Ziling while laughing. Immediately after, she started walking away to find a place to rest. Sword cultivator, thought Lin Feng. He smiled and shook his head. He then followed her. In another part of the palace, in a manor, someone was knocking at a door. "Come in," said Ze from inside the room. Immediately after, the door of the room opened and Lin Haojia was in the doorway. "Miss Ze, can I come in?" said Lin Haojia while waiting outside of the room. "Of course you can. Please come in, Master Lin," replied Ze. Lin Haojia was firmly staring at Ze. He noticed that her clothes hadn't dried off. He could see her delicate young body through her clothes, which gave birth to flames of desire in his heart. "Ze, you're really beautiful," said Lin Haojia softly. Ze slightly lowered her head, remaining silent for a second out of shyness. Then, her lips moved. "I'm not." You are beautiful from head to toe," said Lin Haojia in a soft voice, and then continued, "Ze, since the first time when we met in the thatched hut, I feel my head gets light whenever I see you. I feel like we are perfect for each other. I wouldn't have thought that we would meet again so quickly." Ze remained silent and lowered her head. Her face slightly turned red. "Ze, why are you not talking? If you think that I am playing some game, I can leave now," said Lin Haojia. Ze immediately raised her head and didn't stop shaking her head. At that moment, Lin Haojia had already arrived at her side. They were now very close. "Ze." Lin Haojia's voice was filled with softness and tenderness. Ze's face was becoming redder and redder. She was looking at Lin Haojia. Her eyes revealed that she had some feelings for him. She hadn't thought that everything would happen so quickly, but Lin Haojia was her perfect husband. He was outstanding, had a high social status and had high natural talent. Men like him were rare. He was interested in Ze, an adopted girl from the Ziwei mountain. With his high status, it was obviously a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her. Besides, she had feelings for him, so she couldn't just reject him, even if they hadn't known each other for a long time. "Would you like to become my wife in the future? I want to keep you by my side forever," said Lin Haojia in a soft and tender voice while getting even closer to her. Ze's heart was pounding, her face was red, but she was happy. It was so sudden though. "Yes," said Ze while slightly nodding. Immediately after, she just felt two big hands embrace her. While hugging her, Lin Haojia became even more enthusiastic. He immediately started kissing her. Ze was shaking. She had the sensation that she had been struck by a lightning. She could feel Lin Haojia's warmth. Immediately after, she also put her hands around him and kissed him back. Lin Haojia then started touching her body. A short time after, he started caressing her young body, which was soft and warm. Ze started feeling restless and let out a small moan. The two of them threw themselves onto the bed. They threw their clothes to the side. After a short time, they were moaning from pain, pleasure and heat. Their bodies were in fusion in the middle of that room. In the sky, the sun had started to rise. The Z government was starting to get lively. On that day, Zi Qiong's wedding ceremony was going to happen. There were two silhouettes sitting on the edge of a cliff watching the sunrise. They were sitting on the overhanging cliff with their legs above the precipice. They were gazing into the distance and looking at the sunrise. It looked particularly beautiful. "How beautiful," said Zi Ling, amazed at such a wonderful scenery. It was a glowing red above the sea of clouds. "It's very beautiful indeed," replied Lin Feng. In his previous life, it was one of Lin Feng's dreams to watch the sunrise from the top of a mountain. At that moment, that dream had come true. He finally knew what it felt like to appreciate such natural beauty. Besides, as he was able to use earth fusion, his perception was much stronger than that of Zi Ling. It was as if the beauty of watching that sunrise was enhanced. "I would have never thought that the first time I would watch the sunrise would be with you on my side. Too bad that you are not the kind of man that I am looking for," said Zi Ling while laughing. She immediately stood up and said, "Let's go back. Daddy said that Zi Qiong's future spouse is the most beautiful in the region. Today, I want to see if the rumors are true." Lin Feng stood up as well with a strange expression on his face. He wanted to see the bride, but not because he wanted to see if she was beautiful or not, but because he wanted to see if it was Duan Xinyi. If it was really Duan Xinyi, how could she get married to Zi Qiong? What if the rumors were true though? If that was the case, what would Lin Feng do? In the Zi government area, in a mansion filled with golden decorations, only one floor was illuminated with a purple light. In the Zi government area, in a mansion filled with golden decorations, only one floor was illuminated with a purple light. On the top of the mountain, there was a huge palace, which seemed like it had been entirely transformed. There was one corridor inside which was extremely spacious and much higher than the others. At that moment, at the front end of the long covered corridor in the palace, there was a huge golden Z statue which looked majestic. That was the statue of the ancestors of the Z government. This was a statue, which meant something to all the people who were blood related to the Z government. They had to bow to the ancestors as a sign of respect. Behind the statue was the forbidden area of the palace, which was a huge stone door. Only those who were blood-related Z government would be allowed into this area. In the central district of the mountain, many people were walking towards that palace. The huge statue and the vast palace were there to welcome them. In normal times, the forbidden area was always closed off, they couldn't gain access no matter what their status. At that moment, a group of people were walking down the long covered corridor and arrived in front of the statue. They knelt 3 times and kowtowed 9 times in front of the statue and immediately after, lined up at the side of the statue. The silhouettes were getting more and more numerous. They were almost all blood related to the Z government, but there were some who were friends of the Z government as well. The ceremony was a major event. However, the people related to the Z government and those unrelated were different. Those who were blood-related had to carry out the sacrificial rite before they could enter the forbidden area. They couldn't be interrupted, so very few people would bring outsiders. At that moment, Zi Ling and Ling Feng had also arrived. Lin Feng was still wearing a silver mask and Zi Ling didn't understand why. Zi has arrived. Zi Ling was looking at the distance and saw Zi and Lin Haojia arrive together. A short moment after, they arrived next to Zi Ling. Zi Ling, how come you are still hanging out with the likes of him, said Zi coldly while frowning. Lin Feng looked at Zi and used his earth fusion. His senses became extremely acute. He could clearly perceive that there's something different about Zi. Zi had lost her innocence. What an ignorant girl. Lin Feng was shaking his head. Lin Haojia and Zi had known each other for less than a day and Zi had offered herself to Lin Haojia. Lin Feng didn't know what to say, but since it was Zi's own will, he also could not interfere. He had already fulfilled his duty, he gave her advice and protected her on the journey. Maybe Zi really thought that she and Lin Haojia were going to be together forever. Sister, said Zi Ling while pouting. We came with Lin Feng, we obviously have to stay with him. Zi Ling, you shouldn't trust such an ignorant and evil person. He is tricking you. How did he treat you yesterday evening? Ziyi's tone was more imposing and more domineering than before, she also sounded slightly arrogant. When Lin Feng noticed that, he felt even more exasperated. Before, Ziyi used to be docile when facing Zi Ling, after all, she was an adopted daughter. But at that moment, she sounded like she was talking down to Zi Ling. Maybe she thought that because she was in a relationship with Lin Haojia, her social status was now higher than Zi Ling's. Sister, what are you saying? Zi Ling was speechless. Then, Lin Feng coldly groaned and said in a cold tone, Zi Ling, Zi, your father assigned me to bring you to the Zi government and ensure your safety. I have now fulfilled my duty. From this point on, we no longer have any ties between us. If you see me, act as if you do not know me and I will do the same. As far as you are concerned, Zi, what you do and what you have done were all your own choices and you will have to bear the responsibility on your own. I already warned you enough times. These were Lin Feng's last words. Immediately after, he abruptly turned around and disappeared into the middle of the crowd. Ziyi and Ziling were absolutely dumbstruck. Lin Feng had left and cut the ties between them. Sister, look what you have done. Lin Feng left out of rage, said Ziling, who was angry, but Ziyi groaned coldly and said, good, he would have tried to trick you sooner or later. At that moment, people in the queue started to get livelier. At the end of the corridor, a group of people had appeared and leading them was an old man of the Z government. He was the patriarch of the Z governmental, Ziying. Behind Ziying were two people. One of them was wearing golden clothes. He looked elegant and majestic and diffused a dazzling aura. That was the future husband, Zi Qiong. Besides, on Zi Qiong's side, there was an incredibly delicate and pretty woman. She was wearing a long purple dress. She had an ornamental wedding crown on her head. She was incredibly beautiful. What a beautiful woman. It looks like the rumors are true, the bride is the most beautiful girl in the region. Even Zi Xia of the Z government, isn't as beautiful as her. How beautiful. She looks so elegant. Her clothes make her even more beautiful. Zi Qiong really has good eyes. If only I could find such a beautiful wife, I would be so happy. Even if she wanted me to give up practicing cultivation, would instantly agree. Various comments were spreading through the crowd while looking at the beautiful bride. He really deserved his status as the young master of the Z government. Finding such a beautiful wife was difficult. Initially, they couldn't imagine what kind of girl would have the luck to marry Zi Qiong, but at that moment they had no doubts anymore. That woman was definitely a good match for Zi Qiong and his social status. What a beautiful woman. Ziyi, sister, the rumors were entirely true, there is no woman more beautiful than her in the region, said Ziling in a low voice. At that moment, she was also looking at the woman's beautiful and delicate face. When looking at the woman, she had the feeling that she wasn't beautiful at all. Ziyi's heart was also beating faster, but she remained silent. She turned around and looked at Lin Haojie. Lin Haojie was fixedly staring at the silhouette. He had a strange expression on his face. He couldn't help but sigh and say, Zi Qiong, brother, you're really extremely lucky. When Ziyi saw Lin Haojie narrowing his eyes, jealousy invaded her heart. She then grabbed Lin Haojie's hand. Lin Haojie turned his head and calmly looked at Ziyi. In comparison with that beautiful woman, Ziyi was extremely vulgar when compared to the beautiful bride. Zi Qiong and I are good friends. His wife is very beautiful. If I marry Ziyi, people will laugh at me. I will make myself a laughing stock, thought Lin Haojie, feeling depressed. He looked at Ziyi in a cold way. He had already had his fun with Ziyi, he didn't need her anymore. When Ziyi saw Lin Haojie's facial expression, a piercing coldness gradually invaded her heart. Alright, everybody, calm down. At that moment, a cold and detached voice spread through the atmosphere. The crowd gradually calmed down and everybody looked at Ziying in the middle of the huge covered corridor. Zi Xia, come here, said Ziying while turning around. A beautiful young woman arrived. She raised her head and moved to Ziying's side. Zi Xia was Zi Qiong's sister. She was the precious daughter of the Z government. Even though she wasn't as beautiful as the bride, she still had the power to drive men wild. A beautiful woman such as she could not easily be found. Zi Xia's is also very beautiful, whispered Lin Haojie. At least, she was much better than Ziyi. Ziyi's face turned deathly pale. She was staring at Lin Haojie, but he wasn't even looking at her. Sister. What's wrong? Said Ziling as if she had noticed something wrong. She started pulling on Ziyi's hand, but Ziyi remained frozen in place. She was just staring at Lin Haojie. On the day before, he had been so sweet to her and had kept whispering honeyed phrases. He had promised that they would be together forever. why was he so cold at that moment? Today is the day of my son's wedding ceremony, said Ziying from the corridor. He then continued, at the same time, I would like to find a husband for my daughter, Zi Xia. This will be a simultaneous happy occasion for our family. If a young and outstanding young man is interested in marrying my daughter, come into the corridor and battle for her hand. The last one standing will be able to marry my daughter and become my new son-in-law. Besides, you will be able to enter the forbidden area with Zi Qiong. The wedding tradition of the Zi government was particularly strange. The crowd first congratulated them, then they could proceed with the ritual of the ancestors, and only then could they enter the forbidden area. When they came out of the forbidden area, they were officially husband and wife. Besides, it was said that people could gain great benefits from entering the forbidden area. Therefore, when Ziying finished talking, many people were astonished, enter the forbidden area? The rule of the Zi government was that, in order to enter the forbidden area, a young man had to be a direct descendant of the Zi government. Therefore, daughters of the government and son-in-laws couldn't go into the forbidden area. That was the continued tradition. However, this time, they were not respecting the rules, which stupefied many people. Amongst the young men who were present, many of them looked excited and were eager to give it a try. Lin Haojia was one of them. At that moment, nobody had noticed that, in the middle of the crowd, there was a young man wearing a silver mask who was also looking at that young bride. The expression in his eyes was sharp. He raised his hands to his silver mask and then slowly took it off. Immediately after, he slowly walked forwards. The beautiful bride who was next to Zi Qiong was actually Duan Xianyi, the princess of Shuiyu. The Zi government must be forcing her to marry Zi Qiong. If she had refused to marry him and enter the forbidden area, they would have forced Zi Qiong to take her innocence and then arrange her marriage, after the humiliation. Instead, she had accepted in order to preserve her honor and integrity. She had always kept her innocence and had never been with a man. However, if she entered the forbidden area with Zi Qiong, she didn't know what would happen to her. This was her current situation. What would Duan Xianyi do? When Ziying saw that so many young men were eager to give it a try, a smile appeared on his face and he said, I will add one more thing, my daughter, Zi Xia, is 18 years old. The young man who will marry her cannot be older than 22 years old. When Ziying saw that so many young men were eager to give it a try, a smile appeared on his face and he said, I will add one more thing, my daughter, Zi Xia, is 18 years old. The young man who will marry her cannot be older than 22 years old. Oh, I cannot compete. There's nothing I can do. When Ziying finished talking, disappointment appeared on the faces of a myriad of young men. As expected, the Zi government was selecting the most outstanding young talents. Those older than 22 years old couldn't join in. All right, now, those who would like to become my son-in-law can come into the covered corridor for the battle, said Ziying. When he finished talking, two silhouettes immediately started walking in the covered corridor, and when they arrived in front of Ziying, they looked at each other. No need to exchange greetings, you can immediately start fighting, said Ziying while waving his hand. The two people slightly nodded. One of them had broken through to the first Ling Qi layer while the other one had broken through to the second Ling Qi layer. No need to say that the result of the battle was no surprise, the one at the second Ling Qi layer would win. At the bottom of the corridor, many young men were indignant. The young man at the first Ling Qi layer had no chance against the young man at the second Ling Qi layer. At that moment within the crowd, Lin Haojia surprisingly remained silent. While waiting for his turn to fight, he couldn't help but smile coldly. He then said coldly, Uncle, Haojia has feelings for Zi Xia which have been growing for a long time. If I manage to become her husband, that would be my greatest wish. While talking, Lin Haojia started walking through the crowd and arrived in the covered corridor. Arjidhich groaned Zi while feeling depressed. Her face turned deathly pale, a streak of blood ran down the side of her mouth. She had thought that Lin Haojia was strange a moment before. Ze was badly affected, her chest felt oppressed. At the moment, Lin Haojie spoke, she couldn't bear it anymore. That pressure is what led blood to spill from her mouth. She felt extremely depressed. Lin Haojie had told her during the previous night that he wanted to be with her forever. After having a one-night stand with her, he dared try to find another woman to marry while she was forced to watch. Why was he being so cruel? Ze, what's wrong? Asked Ziling when she saw that blood was spilling out of Ze's mouth. She was very surprised. Cough, cough. For a moment, Ze felt dizzy and blacked out. She had no energy in her body any longer, there was absolutely no color remaining on her face. As far as you are concerned, Ze, what you do and what you have done were all your own choices and you will have to bear the responsibility on your own. I already warned you enough times. Lin Feng's words were still resonating in her mind. At that moment, these words were full of meaning for her. She realized how ridiculous she had been for warning Zi Ling about Lin Feng. She hadn't even managed to protect herself. Ze slowly raised her head and saw the handsome silhouette in the covered corridor. On Ze's extremely pale face appeared a particularly strange smile. Ze, what a foolish girl, and yet she thought that she was a dragon amongst humans, said Ze while mocking herself and wiping off the blood on her mouth. In a distant place, Lin Feng was looking at Lin Haojie go into the covered corridor, then he looked at Ze and saw that she was smiling. He slightly shook his head. Ze could only blame herself for what was happening. Zi Xia, please understand that I've had feelings for you, for a long time. Today, I want to marry you, I want you to become my wife, said Lin Haojie to Zi Xia. He sounded just as soft as when he was talking to Ze. Zi Xia felt embarrassed and just slightly nodded. Lin Haojie smiled satisfyingly. Immediately after, he turned around, looked at the young man in the corridor and said, "You can get down by yourself." When the young man saw Lin Haojie, a light flashed in his eyes and he said, while gnashing his teeth, "I've already heard your reputation, the Golden Rain Sword. Today, I ask for you to exchange pointers with me." Immediately after, the young man's body flickered and he threw himself towards Lin Haojie. Lin Haojie smiled coldly. He raised his sword which then the sky filled with a golden rain. Its resplendent brightness was magnificent. When the golden rain disappeared, Lin Haojie's sword was just as resplendent as before. However, the golden rain had fallen on his opponent. Lin Haojie had killed his opponent without mercy. How cruel, thought the people in the crowd. He had wanted to exchange pointers, that's all. Surprisingly, Lin Haojie decided to kill him. Lin Haojie glanced at the crowd, his eyes were filled with vigor. He then said coldly, "Zi Xia is the woman I love. Who will try and prevent me from marrying her? If someone dares try to stand between our love, I will show no mercy when cutting them down with my sword." Everybody in the crowd was astonished. Lin Haojie was extremely cruel. That way, nobody would dare to go into the covered corridor anymore. "Ze, Lin Haojie is a good husband for you," said Ziying while smiling. The crowd was astonished again. Ziying was dropping a hint, and he hoped that Lin Haojie would become his next son-in-law. As expected, nobody dared to go into the covered corridor. When Ziying saw that, he smiled. Obviously, if nobody dares to fight anymore, the competition had ended. Zi Qiong, Zi Xia. Father. Zi Qiong and Zi Xia started walking while looking solemn and respectful. "You too can proceed to the ritual of our ancestors." "Understood," said Zi Qiong while slightly nodding. He then said, "For the ritual, the husband and the wife must kneel 3 times and kowtow 9 times as well as make an oath to each other." When he finished talking, Zi Qiong looked at Duan Xinyi. She looked expressionless and remained silent. "No need, you and Zi Xia can kneel 3 times and kowtow 9 times for the ritual, that's enough," said Ziying calmly. He also understood that Duan Xinyi wasn't willing to marry Zi Qiong. Since it was that way, the ritual of the ancestors wasn't necessary. The most important thing was what was going to happen after they entered the forbidden area. Zi Qiong and Zi Xia looked at each other and then walked towards the gigantic statue. They then knelt 3 times and kowtowed 9 times. When they finished this, they both stood up and muttered some incantations. Immediately after, they cut the tip of their finger and let some blood flow out. They then put their fingers into a hole within the statue. They let the blood spill into the hole and enter the statue. Boom! At that moment, a rumbling noise spread through the air. The statue slowly rotated and fully revealed the stone gate which started to open. It was the entrance to the forbidden area. That gate was the only entrance into the forbidden area. Only those who were blood-related to the Zi government could make that gate open. When Zi Qiong saw the gate open itself, he looked excited. Alright, Xinyi and Hao Jia, you can follow Zi Qiong and Zi Xia inside. Alright, replied Lin Hao Jia moving towards the entrance. He looked excited. Duan Xinyi was just standing in the same place remaining motionless. Xinyi, didn't you hear me, said Zi in a cold tone. I will not go inside. Finally, Duan Xinyi, who had remained uncommunicative until that moment, opened her mouth. What she said stupefied many people. Duan Xinyi sounded like she wasn't willing to marry Zi Qiong. Zi Ying and Zi Qiong were stupefied and looked ice-cold. Have you thought about the consequences, said Zi with an evil tone, his voice sounded majestic yet cruel. I will not go in with him, said Duan Xinyi. Immediately after, she removed the purple wedding attire that she was wearing and threw them onto the floor. She wasn't wearing anything related to the wedding anymore. She had thrown all the wedding clothing onto the floor. Her long hair looked like a black waterfall. Even though she wasn't wearing her purple wedding clothes, she was still as beautiful as before in the simple unadorned clothes. She looked soft and tender. She was morally elevated. You seem to be forgetting our agreement, said Ziying in a piercingly cold way. He would have never thought that Duan Xinyi would cancel their agreement. An agreement? I have been forced, do you call that an agreement? Said Duan Xinyi while smiling. She then continued, no need to keep threatening me, I will not let him have my body. I will not marry him even if that was not the case. I already have someone I love. When Duan Xinyi finished talking, she took out a dagger stupefying the crowd, she then pressed it against her throat. The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. Duan Xinyi, that extremely beautiful woman wanted to kill herself, did she really want to die rather than get married? Stop, said Ziying and Zi Qiong whose facial expression drastically changed. But they just saw that Duan Xinyi had a natural smile on her face. I just hope that once I'm dead, I'll still be able to find a way to let Lin Feng know that I really didn't know, said Duan Xinyi while looking towards the sky. It seemed like she had changed completely and was finally revealing her true self. Tears were flowing down her cheeks. Lin Feng, I really didn't know. Lin Feng. Lin Feng. Lin Feng must be the man she loves, guessed the crowd when hearing that beautiful woman's plea. The fact that she hoped that he could understand after her death proved that she cared for him. The crowd was feeling gloomy. If only that beautiful woman could have had those feelings for them, that would be such an auspicious occasion. She's calling Lin Feng. Ziling was stupefied, she was blankly staring at Duan Xinyi, but it couldn't be the same person. The Lin Feng that Duan Xinyi was talking about was definitely not the one she knew. How could such a beautiful woman fall in love with the Lin Feng that she knew? At that moment, Lin Feng in the middle of the crowd, was violently shaking. Lin Feng, I really didn't know. Why would she think about Lin Feng in her last moments? I have greatly misunderstood her. Suddenly, Lin Feng's heart felt painful. He was the one who had killed the blackguards to save her, he had saved Duan Xinyi, but after figuring out the plot, he misjudged and abandoned Duan Xinyi. It was because of him that she had ended up in this situation and was being forced to marry Zi Qiong. Why would she need to explain anything to him? It was him who should have believed in her. Wait, said Lin Feng. He took a step and threw himself through the air. He immediately landed within the covered corridor. Lin Feng's silhouette drew people's attention. The crowd all looked at him. His clothes were white, clean and simple. His face was delicate and handsome. Besides, when Duan Xinyi saw Lin Feng, her heart started pounding. It was Lin Feng, he was here. Looking natural and unrestrained, it was really him, he was really in front of her and it wasn't an illusion. At the bottom of the covered corridor, Zi Ling and Zi Yi were staring at Lin Feng. They were shivering. Could it be that Lin Feng was really the one Duan Xinyi was talking about? Why did he take his silver mask off? Zi Yi, sister, the man she was speaking of is Lin Feng, whispered Zi Ling. She couldn't believe it. At that moment, Zi Yi had hopelessly stopped looking towards Lin Haojie. Her heart was filled with hatred. She then looked at Lin Feng, said coldly, "How could it be Lin Feng? It's impossible." In the covered corridor, Lin Haojie also saw Lin Feng. A light flashed in his eyes. It seemed like he knew that young man from somewhere. He had the impression that he had seen Lin Feng before, but he rejected the idea since he could not remember seeing Lin Feng's face before. Duan Xinyi was looking at Lin Feng while remaining completely silent. She was also starting to put less pressure on the dagger. Lin Feng. Duan Xinyi couldn't believe her eyes. She just whispered Lin Feng's name. "It's really me, I'm sorry for having made you suffer," said Lin Feng while sighing. His apology sounded sincere. When Duan Xinyi heard Lin Feng, she started weeping and heavily sobbing. Immediately tears started to unceasingly slide down her beautiful cheeks. However, a smile was on her face. At that moment, it seemed like everything had lost its splendor compared to this beautiful moment. The crowd was extremely moved. A metallic sound spread through the air. Duan Xinyi dropped the dagger on the ground. She then started walking slowly towards Lin Feng. When she arrived in front of him, she said, "Lin Feng, I do not blame you, I really do not blame you." Lin Feng was looking at Duan Xinyi, a deep and profound expression appeared in his eyes. He looked perplexed. In the imperial clan, there was the crown prince, Duan Wudao, who was extremely aggressive, and the second prince, Duan Wuya, who was mysterious and extremely strong. However, Duan Xinyi, their sister, was pure, innocent and kind-hearted. Even though she had an extremely high status of a princess, she was also just an inexperienced beautiful young girl. When the crowd saw that, they were moved. Maybe this sweet couple were soulmates. Zi Ling and Zi Yi were astonished. It was really him, it was really Lin Feng. It was the Lin Feng whom they had been looking down on the whole time. Surprisingly, that Lin Feng was really the one the princess loved. Zi Yi had been really ridiculous to think that Lin Feng would try anything with them. In comparison with Duan Xinyi, they were nothing. Lin Haojie had dumped Zi Yi for Zi Xia in a heartbeat. In his eyes, Zi Yi was nothing. He hadn't even given her an explanation. In fact, it was so cruel that she couldn't accept it. Besides, it must be an illusion. Why did she love Lin Feng? What the hell is so good about that guy? Hideous expressions also appeared on the faces of the people from the Zi government. Duan Xinyi was supposed to be Zi Qiong's wife. However, at that moment, on the day of her wedding, she surprisingly said that she loved someone else. The Zi government couldn't accept that. The Zi government was losing face. Everybody was going to ridicule them. Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi were humiliating the Zi government in the presence of the entire crowd. "Are you done flirting now?" said Zi Qiong extremely coldly. He looked angrier than anyone else. He had played the most important role in that story. He was the one who wanted to marry Duan Xinyi, but at that moment, she didn't accept him and damaged his reputation. Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi looked at Zi Qiong. Lin Feng moved Duan Xinyi behind him. She liked the feeling of Lin Feng protecting her again. On that day when Lin Feng was chasing the black guards, even though his life was at stake, she had had a similar feeling like he would give his life for her. Duan Xinyi, I have never mistreated you, I am generous, I have never touched you. In the future, if you had asked anything of me, I would have given you anything, but today you decide to flirt with another man, I will not show any mercy, and your body is mine. Zi Qiong was staring at Duan Xinyi and his voice was piercingly cold. The people of the Zi government are so shameless. Lin Feng found Zi Qiong's logic ridiculous. He had forced Duan Xinyi to accept the marriage and he expected her to be thankful to him. If I understand your logic, if someone forces your sister to become his wife, but doesn't touch her, she has to give herself to him, be thankful and willingly become his wife. Is that the logic of the people within the Zi government? Said Lin Feng coldly. The people of the Zi government were coldly staring at Lin Feng. Your name is Lin Feng, you are extremely audacious to dare criticize my Zi government. I will slaughter you. Zi Qiong looked at Lin Feng with killing intent. Lin Feng was younger than him and still dared to slander the Zi government. Lin Feng had a death wish. You can try, said Lin Feng calmly. He was standing there, in his white clothes, with his sword on still his back. He was expressionless and fearless. A gentle breeze blew through the large covered corridor. Lin Feng's white clothes were fluttering in the wind. At that moment, he looked frivolous, natural and unrestrained. Zi Ling and Zi Yi were absolutely dumbstruck and blankly stared at Lin Feng. Lin Feng wasn't the same person anymore. He seemed like he was a completely different person. He wasn't quite patient and accommodating anymore. His voice was filled with ardor. He was standing tall and upright while facing the Zi government alone. At that moment, Lin Feng looked unique and exceptionally strong, as if he was going to unsheath a terrifyingly powerful sword. What an insane guy. Zi Qiong, brother, let me take care of him, said Lin Haojia while taking a step. This was a chance for him to show off his strength. All right, brother, said Zi Qiong while slightly nodding. Immediately after, Lin Haojia started running. In a flash, he arrived in front of Lin Feng. His golden clothes were dazzling and magnificent. Why do I have the impression that we know each other? Asked Lin Haojia while frowning. Lin Feng smiled and said, just attack me already. Since you're so impatient to die, I will grant your wish. Remember the name of the person who is going to kill you. My name is Lin Haojia, also known as the Golden Rain Sword, said Lin Haojia arrogantly. He then started walking again. His golden rain invaded the atmosphere and filled the sky. The golden rain turned into a dazzling light. It was resplendent. When the golden rain fell down, the golden light enveloped Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng was standing completely motionless. He raised his hand. Some sword chi spread through the air. A bright and resplendent light flashed for a second and then disappeared without trace. However, at that moment, Lin Haojia let out a horrible shriek. His long sword had fallen onto the ground. The hand was still holding the sword and had been cut off from the elbow. The crowd was absolutely dumbstruck. Their eyes were wide open. They hadn't seen what Lin Feng had done and how he achieved such a result. At that moment, Lin Feng was still standing in the same place. It seemed like he hadn't moved at all. However, Lin Haojia's hand had really been cut off and was on the ground. The Golden Rain Sword, you are humiliation for anyone who uses a sword, you shouldn't even be allowed to hold a sword, said Lin Feng coldly. The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. Especially Zi Ling and Zi Yi, they couldn't stop shaking. They were completely stunned. Lin Haojie, a sword master. Lin Feng, a coward and a piece of trash. In front of Lin Feng, Lin Haojie was a piece of trash and shouldn't have been allowed to hold a sword. Lin Feng had cut off Lin Haojie's forearm in a single strike. Lin Feng had cut off Lin Haojie's forearm in a single strike. On top of that, he hadn't used his sword but had only waved his hand through the air. It released a resplendent light which had made the Golden Rain attack look like a joke. The name, Golden Rain Sword, had become a joke. Exactly like Lin Feng had said, Lin Haojie shouldn't have been allowed to hold a sword. It was a humiliation for all sword users. Lin Haojie was far from being talented, especially when compared to Lin Feng. Ze had been really ridiculous to consider Lin Feng as a piece of trash and to think of Lin Haojie as a good person. Thinking that she would become a dragon amongst the people, she had offered the purity of her body to him and been humiliated. She had completely ignored Lin Feng's advice. At that moment, Ziyi's laughter was strange. At that moment, Lin Haojie, with his missing arm, looked incredibly pitiful. Lin Feng, who was protecting Duan Xinyi, looked heroic, natural and unrestrained. Lin Feng was really a dragon amongst the people. He was open-minded, even though Ziyi had humiliated him over and over again, he had never lost his temper. He had never been aggressive because he didn't care, and he also thought that it wasn't worth letting her words bother him. Lin Feng was really an amazing person. Ziling was also looking at the confident Lin Feng as if it was the first time she had laid eyes on him. The Lin Feng, who was standing in the covered corridor, was natural and unrestrained. He had cut off Lin Haojie's arm from the elbow without restraint. Was it really the same young man as the one that they had picked up on the side of the road? Was it the same young man who was holding a broom and sweeping the garden? Was it the same coward, who had made a fire in the thatched hut and was treated badly through the whole journey? Ze and Ziling understood what their father's words meant when they were leaving. Zinan had made Lin Feng go with them to make sure that they would arrive safely at the Z government. It was his mission to protect them. At the same time, he had also given them an amazing opportunity to get to know him and become closer with him. Ze had been so ridiculous, calling Lin Feng a piece of trash, despising him, and getting fooled by Lin Haojie who had taken her virginity. Ziling had also never given Lin Feng any respect either. Not allowed to hold a sword. Lin Haojie was just standing there motionless, blood was flowing from his arm onto the ground. He looked deathly pale. It was the first time that somebody told him that he, Lin Haojie, also known as the Golden Rain Sword, shouldn't have been allowed to hold a sword, that he was a humiliation to sword users. A sword is sharp, using one requires a person to be determined and proud. You don't have these qualities, your sword play is flashy but has no substance. You shouldn't even be allowed to hold a sword, and you should never be considered as a sword user as it is a humiliation to those who actually train in the sword. Said Lin Feng sounding ice-cold. Lin Haojie had none of the qualities required to be a good sword user, his style was flashy but without substance. He only focused on looks and not the sharpness of his sword. You dared to cut my hand? Who the hell are you? Said Lin Haojie while raising his head. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. The impression that he knew Lin Feng was growing in his mind. Actually, I'm not done with you yet. Lin Feng had an ice-cold smile on his face. He then moved forwards, in a flash, his silhouette disappeared and immediately appeared in front of Lin Haojie. Lin Haojie was violently shaking. He had no way of blocking Lin Feng's attacks. He felt an incredible sword chi penetrate into his chest and destroy his organs. His face was completely distorted and he was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. Not only had Lin Feng cut off his hand, but he was also going to kill him. It's you, said Lin Haojie when he saw Lin Feng's eyes, his heart was pounding. That was the uncommunicative young man from the thatched hut who had made the fire. It was the one whom he called a coward. Back in the thatched hut, Lin Feng was just a useless coward making a fire for them, but at that moment, Lin Feng could easily kill him. That was completely the opposite of what he believed. Lin Haojie's heart was pounding, but he knew that his fate was already sealed. "Indeed, it's me," said Lin Feng coldly. Lin Feng's hand was on Lin Haojie's chest, releasing qi. Immediately after, Lin Haojie groaned and the qi disappeared. However, his eyes were still wide open. He could not accept his death, even in his last moments. He had a high social status, was talented and handsome. How could he die so easily in front of a huge crowd? Boom! 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 When the crowd saw the corpse collapse onto the ground, their hearts were pounding. Lin Feng had killed Lin Haojie, the Golden Rain Sword. He didn't care about Lin Haojie's social status, he simply killed him. It had looked simple for him to kill Lin Haojie, it was as if Lin Feng had just killed an insect. At that moment, those who were shocked the most were the sisters, Zi and Zi Ling. Lin Haojie had died. It had been that easy for Lin Feng to kill Lin Haojie. Sister, he was wearing a mask because he knew the princess. He knew that something was going to happen and he didn't want to put us in danger and wanted to avoid us getting involved. Zi Ling had suddenly understood why Lin Feng was wearing his silver mask. He didn't want other people to know that Zi and Zi Ling had come with him. Whatever would happen, they would not get in trouble because of him. You two owe Lin Haojie nothing. Lin Feng's words were resonating in their minds. In the thatched hut, considering Lin Feng's strength, could the three evil alpacas have harmed them? It would have been impossible. It was just that Lin Feng remained silent at the time and didn't reveal everything. However, these two girls didn't like that, they liked men who would show off, who were arrogant. They liked Lin Haojie. They regretted their actions. Especially Zi, who had lost her virginity to Lin Haojie. A few honeyed phrases had been enough and she had given her body to him. However, regretting was useless. Lin Haojie had been killed by Lin Feng. Lin Feng would never look at such a foolish girl. Zi, who was usually very arrogant, was crushed. She had called Lin Feng a piece of trash, but actually, in Lin Feng's eyes, she was the real piece of trash. She was just a pitiful, lost young girl, nothing more. Lin Feng had never been affected by her words because her words meant nothing. "You will die," coldly shouted Zi Qiong. Hideous expressions could be seen on the faces of the people from the Zi government. Lin Feng turned around and looked at Duan Xianyi. On Duan Xianyi's face, you could see that she had cried, but at that moment, a warm and tender smile had also appeared on her face. She was calmly standing behind Lin Feng. "The people who made you want to take your own life will all die," said Lin Feng calmly. "Stay close to me." "All right," said Duan Xianyi while slightly nodding. Lin Feng put his hand behind his back, grabbed his long sword and unsheathed it. His sword was as limpid as water, it looks magnificent and resplendent as well as sharp. A sword user. The crowd, when they saw Lin Feng's hand, were astonished. Lin Feng despised Lin Haojie and his golden rain. Lin Feng could kill Lin Haojie with only his bare hands. How sharp was his sword? Zi Ling's hands were shaking. That was a sword. Lin Feng had taken his sword out. She liked sword users who did everything to become sword masters. They looked heroic, natural, and majestic. But sword users were rare, strong sword masters were even rarer. Lin Haojie was already the strongest sword user she had ever seen. Lin Haojie's sword was magnificent, resplendent, yet Lin Feng could kill him easily. How powerful was Lin Feng's sword? White clothes and a silver sword. Lin Feng had taken out his sword. At that moment, he was calmly standing there and a wonderful feeling invaded his body as if the heavens and the earth felt different from before. Lin Feng had started his earth fusion. Zi Qiong also had a strange feeling. Even though he had said that he wanted Lin Feng to die, he wasn't going to attack because he didn't dare approach Lin Feng. Lin Feng was calmly standing there, which gave Zi Qiong a feeling of inferiority. He hated that feeling. "Kill him," coldly said Ziying. In a flash, a few people appeared in the corridor looking solemn. They released deadly energy which filled the entire atmosphere. It was extremely oppressive. A silhouette flickered and moved towards Lin Feng at full speed, but Lin Feng remained calm and motionless. He looked like an unmoving mountain. At the moment when the opponent arrived near him, Lin Feng finally moved. He took a step forwards, a very small step. At that moment, extremely strong deadly sword energy spread through the air and transformed into a strong wind which struck the opponents. At that moment, the opponents felt that they were suffocating. It seemed like the Lin Feng wasn't a human being, he looked like a sword. Besides, his sword looked like a heavenly sword releasing heaven's fury. At that moment, Ziling was also suffocating. A sword had been used, its splendor illuminated the atmosphere and caused heaven and earth to tremble. Silence invaded the crowd. The people who were moving towards Lin Feng all suddenly stopped. At that moment, it seemed like time had stopped. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.